Hello and welcome to another slow chat. We're going to have a nice, slow, casual, relaxing conversation. Mikey is right. It is a cigar time. This week, I have the magnificent Oliva V in what's called a Lancero. That's the very long, sort of narrower. Vitola is the fancy word for a shape. That's the longer, narrower shape there. And it's a beautiful cigar. This in any form, the Oliva V in any form is a beautiful cigar. This one is my personal favorite because as you narrow the gauge of the cigar, the ratio of the wrapper to the fill changes and there becomes more wrapper versus fill. And what that means is that the wrapper's flavors become more dominant. And in this case, that means chocolate and cacao, complex spices. It's a really beautiful, complex cigar. It has to be smoked fairly carefully. The narrower the gauge, the more easily you can accidentally overheat it, and that'll ruin your flavors. So it does require a little bit of concentration, but this is I'm treating myself tonight. This is hands down one of my absolute favorites. So we got that out of the way. I know people always ask about, what are you smoking? Let's just get that out of the way early so we can move on. I'm also going to be pairing that with, I'm going to start off with some Dimple 12, which is kind of my go-to default, but then I do have a little bit of my Balvenie Doublewood 12, which is a really nice match to this cigar. So we'll see how I'm feeling a little bit later on. I may well switch. Okay. Everybody's asking about what happened today, and I think I'm going to talk about that once I bring on my guest for tonight, which is Carly. And many of you know at least a little bit about Carly. I've posted a few things about her before. You may have seen her on A Current Affair. You may have heard her name going around. You might have seen the video that she released to the world that actually started a real kind of shit fight for her and really threw her in the deep end in the end. So we'll get to her very shortly, and I actually wanted to chat with Carly about what we don't know from today, because that's really the big story out of today is that we really don't actually know very much about what happened today. We know a little bit. But there's something that I know that you don't, and you're about to find out. And this put a smile on my face, and I'm so very grateful to the person that leaked this to me. And it is my understanding that we are going to hear and see some really, really heartwarming and encouraging things in the next few days. And this is a sample, a very small taste of what is to come. This is from a Victoria Police member. All I can say is that they are a uniformed, badged member. And I can say nothing more about this person. Here is what they have to say. I've been at the protest the last couple of days, and it was shit to watch the desperation of these people. One bloke pleading, walk with us, stand with us. I was silently nodding and wanting to join him, just to shake his hand and acknowledge that he isn't alone. They've all got families to feed and bills to pay just like we do. Albeit there were a number of troublemakers, but most of these protesters were there for the right reasons. The media just spin it to fit their narrative. That's a direct quote, and it's not the whole thing. I can't read the whole thing just yet, but that is a direct quote of a statement from a serving badged police officer. And I think one of the things that's just so important to not lose sight of is that they are human too. And I would say that they're making very poor choices by following the orders they're following. I'm not going to give them a free pass. I'm not going to turn a blind eye to the very poor moral choices that are being made right now, just like I call out violence when it comes from my side. I'm not going to turn a blind eye to that. But we all have to find a way to move forward after all of this. We have to find a way to live together after all of this. And that's going to require a lot of forgiveness and a lot of letting things go. And I think there is going to come a point in time. Is it now? Is it soon? Is it in a couple of months? I don't know. But there's going to come a point in time when we're going to have an opportunity to move on and to put this behind us. We will be able to tear Daniel Andrews down. He will take his walk of shame. Lawsuits, no doubt, will be launched against many of the senior and more powerful people. But a lot of the order followers, as much as they should never have followed these orders, we're going to have to let it go. And when these people reach out to us, and when these in the next couple of days is my expectation, obviously I can't control what they do. So hopefully they follow through on what they're planning on. But I believe we're going to start to see more and more, and actually some fairly significant numbers of VicPol officers beginning to actually finally say what they've been thinking for too long. So my hope is to be able to hug a police officer at one of the protests sometime soon, and to be able to start marching together the way that we're seeing happening in France and other places. So that's something that has really encouraged me and warmed my heart today in what was an otherwise fairly quiet and fairly downbeat day. So before I take up too much more of your time, today's guest, Carly, many of you will be familiar with her, at least to some degree, because of the Instagram video that she released that had tens of millions of views. Then the fact that a current affair came and tried to destroy her, and they underestimated who they were messing with. And after a little bit of time to heal, Carly has come back stronger than ever. So without further ado, Carly, how are you?
Hi, how you going?
Doing very well. Thanks for joining me tonight. I'm really glad to finally be able to bring you and introduce you to my Facebook audience. You've introduced me to your Instagram audience. You helped me to get onto Instagram, and we've done a couple of Instagram lives and that sort of stuff. And finally, I can repay the favor. And I think people are going to love you, and I think they're going to be really encouraged by the choices that you've made when you were faced with what you were faced with. But we have to also assume that there are people here who have no idea who you are, no idea what was going on. So can we start with probably Carly the photographer is probably the place to start, or you can start before that if you want to, but that'll come into it later on. And who was Carly, the person that decided to sit down in front of her camera and pour her heart out?
Wow. Do you know
who
what?
was that naive young woman who made that momentous decision?
It was someone that didn't consider that her video would go not just viral, like around the world and back again, more than I will probably go in my lifetime. If I had known it would get close to 1 million, not let alone 40 million, I would have put some makeup on. I was sitting on my bed, and so what happened? I'll start with what happened with the video. I got the news that we were going into lockdown 5. I can't keep up because I'm in regional lockdown 8. So timeline's all a bit wishy-washy. Yeah. And we got 4 hours notice, not even. I think it was by 4 o'clock or something, the lockdown was happening, and we found out at lunchtime. It was so quick. And I, again, was about to lose a huge job. And I put my camera on and I just went, bleh. And it wasn't scripted. I just said everything that was on my mind, and I posted it. And then I went and had a shower. I cried, talked to a friend, came back an hour later, and it already had 200,000 views. And I was like, oh, shit. And then I was like, okay. Then about a couple of hours later, it was close to 1 million. And that's when I started panicking, because I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was there an oh shit moment where you even sort of thought about pulling it down?
Yeah, yes. It was more so because I put it up, I think it went up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is dead time on Instagram. So I didn't think, to be honest, I didn't think anyone would want to listen to me talk for 15 minutes, let alone scream at the camera. And then I went to bed that night, just emotionally exhausted, big day, feeling shit, woke up the next morning, and I looked at my phone and I was like, oh, what have I done? And I was panicking. I won't lie, my heart was racing. And you know, a video is going viral every time you refresh your Instagram feed. It goes 100, 100, 100, 100 likes, 100 comments, 100 follows. Yeah. And I just kept doing this, and it was just like da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. And I rang a friend, and she was hysterical because she's like, such and such shared this person shared this person shared this. And I'm just sitting there going, oh, shit. And then, weirdly, the media was nice in the beginning, because I'd already done – so that was my 3rd viral video. So I'd done 2 prior to that had sort of been shared a lot, but not to the extent that this one had been done. So I had done a couple of appearances on Sunrise and the Today Show, and, they were treating me as this little meek, helpless being, and that was fine. Then I started getting the press call outs to come on and discuss that video. And thankfully they let me speak, and I got decent media plots. I got 5 minutes here, 4 minutes there. And
okay. I need to pause you. Sorry. I've just got a couple of questions of newcomers coming in, not quite sure who you are, and they missed the intro. So So just in brief, Carly is someone who we actually knew each other before this happened, which was funny. So my wife discovered you on Instagram. Your photographs are amazing. You're an incredibly talented photographer, and we decided we were going to engage you to get some work done for new family photos. And so that kind of happened. And then all of this blew up, and Carly made a video. And what we're doing tonight is telling a little bit of her story, because I think it's a really encouraging story to understand. Number one, it helps people to understand the tactics that get used and the kinds of things that happen, and it's going to help you to be less easily manipulated yourself. But it's also going to help you if you ever find yourself on the receiving end of anything. It's going to give you a bit more perspective, I think. And help people to be able to be courageous in the face of that sort of thing. So that's that. I'm not going to spoil the story any more than that. But by way of introduction, we are hearing Carly's story, and then we're going to talk about current events and all sorts of other stuff after that. Sorry, Carly, I cut you off.
No, that's all right. I love that you're in Danistan and I'm in the Socialist Republic of Victoria, because we are actually in two different states.
We are in two different places now. Yeah. I'm Metro, you're regional.
I've heard Danistan's a lot more horrific than the Socialist Republic of Victoria, but...
Well, I tell you what, when even the ground shakes, such is the level of oppression, you've got to wonder what's going on.
Can I, just before I go back into my story, can I say the quality of memes did not disappoint. They were exceptional. My personal favorite was the tradies blowing up the Balti. I was like... Bravo.
We had not as significant as that one was, but we had an earthquake some years ago, not long after Federation Square building was finished. And so the earthquake happened, and there were all the usual means of like the outdoor plastic chair on its back. We will rebuild. But then there was a meme that came out that just killed me, and it was, new images of the horrific destruction to this iconic building. We'll rebuild, and just because it's all the triangles, it's such a hideous building. It just broke me up. That was the number one for me.
My favorite one, I think the one that won the internet, or my personal favorite, was it says COVID. You put the scared people in. Earthquake. You put the scared people out. God. You put the scared people back in and shake them all about. And I was just like,
yes, I saw that one. I mean, a little bit of blasphemy, but okay. Yes, that had me laughing as well. I ran into where my wife has a home office here, and I ran in to show her when I came across that one. Okay, so Melbourne's meme game is strong. Our meme spirit has not been broken.
I just appreciated that through all of this, people still had a sense of humor, and to be honest, that's what's going to carry us through, honestly. But so if I go back to the story, it hit 1 million views within 12 hours. That was the scary bit. That's proper virality. And then, I did a couple of media spots, and, they were quite nice, I will say. They asked me very careful questions, and I could already see Rebecca Madden tried to do it. They tried to do a bit of a got ya. Because what they do is they lead you in, and then they try and get you to say something anti-lockdown, anti-COVID, anti-the jab. I'm not an idiot, so I'm very careful. And so they basically were trying to lead me down a path. And, Rebecca Madden's question to me on the Today Show was even like, well, you're not a COVID denier. And I'm like, no, Rebecca, I'm not a COVID denier. Do you know what I mean? Like, you could see that they were trying to, like, who are you? Are you anti,
It's funny. People look for pigeonholes. It's in their brain. They have this series of pigeonholes, and they just want to be able to slot you into one. And that's a really dangerous thing. And we saw how dangerous that was with Daniel Andrews and Setka coming out with this whole, it's a bunch of Nazis type of approach, bunch of right-wing nut jobs. What they're inviting people to do is to open up that little container, shove all of us inside, and then close the container again. It's a very powerful psychological trick for people that want to manipulate you, and it's very important to be aware of it.
What the media, I don't think they failed to do is, because I was just this poor little defenseless girl that had a video going viral, I don't think for the first part anyone background checked me to see that I actually have a background in media. I've actually worked for News Limited, so I'm very familiar. I worked in the Herald Sun building for 4 years in South Bank. I've worked in advertising and marketing my whole life. I am rather familiar with their tactics, and which is why I was confident to go on those shows. I wouldn't put myself in that position had I felt not comfortable. where things sort of started taking a turn is obviously I was very like the whole nature of my speech was very anti this lockdown. And very anti the Labor government, which I am, and I stand by that. You know, there's nothing in that video that I said that I don't still stand by. There is one caveat for those of you who may have watched it. I did make a reference to the fact that we had no one in ICU, which at the time was true. So at the time, we had gone back into lockdown, I believe, for 8 cases, 8 asymptomatic cases. And that was our 5th lockdown. So my frustration was over the fact that no one was actually sick at that point. Obviously that didn't date well, but you know, that's the nature of doing a video on the moment. So fast forward a couple of days, and of course, people who were anti my sentiments started to speak up. There was a well-known social media agitator, shall we say, that took issue with my stance because I refused to say where I stood on the vaccines. And this person decided or took it upon themselves to just absolutely go to town on me on social media. I didn't engage with them at all. That was the crazy thing. I hadn't spoken to them. We've never even met.
You never mentioned them in your video. You never dragged them into it. They just decided to come from left field and have a go.
And that's like, before I go into this point, that's something I'd really like to make clear. In my video, I didn't attack anyone. I wasn't rude or demeaning or belittling anyone. I was speaking very candidly about my own personal experience. I don't speak for other people, and I don't position myself to be some kind of advocate. I'm just speaking as Carl's. However, this particular person's whole MO is to destroy people online. They
have an outrage-based following.
Correct.
Their entire brand is built on outrage.
Yeah, and that's very typical of this sort of SJW wokeism. You know, that's a real sort of symptom of that. And it always comes from an aggressive point of view. It's always about outrage. It's always about trying to find the thing to cancel them on. And the interesting thing is, you know, as someone who's like, I built my businesses on social media. I've been a social media adopter since it was on, you know, since it started.
You were on social media before it was cool.
Before. I am an original Facebooker. Embarrassing to say, but I am.
Hang on. Are you an original MySpacer?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to poke fun at you because I've still got a MySpace, but I can't poke fun at you now.
I'm sure mine's there. I don't know how to get into it, but yes. See, this is the thing. Like, as a creative and as a photographer, I loved the idea of having this like platform to sort of shamelessly put my content out. Like, you know, and it unfortunately gets mistaken as this like level of narcissism. It's not. Like, as a creator, we aspire to have people commentating on our stuff. So the idea, the very basic principle of social media very much appeals to a creative, you know?
Yeah.
So, sorry.
You as a creative, I mean, you are basically running a business. You can't survive unless there are people that want the thing that you make. So it's not narcissism to be saying, hey, everybody, I made a thing, have a look at it. That's just part and parcel of it. 100%.
And you know, like, I won't lie, like there's a huge part of my ego that really gets off on people telling me my photos are good or that, you know, my artwork's good. So, yeah, I've been on social media since it started. That's kind of a tragic admission there. But the interesting thing is this person who was like going to town on me, obviously I have been campaigning much like you since like very early days. I think I started becoming very vocal in April as it became very clear this wasn't just like a 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And, you know, I'm sure we'll go into this as the conversation progresses, but I am a massive history nerd, you know, and I'm someone that has a very keen interest in dictatorships, socialist policy, and history at large. So there was just a few things that just sent off red flags. And I was like, don't be hysterical. But just with the nature of, you know, I was very invested with the US election as well. And seeing how we were coming into the 2020 election, I was very invested with what was going on in America. So
and to be clear, because you've spent time there, it's not just that you're some weirdo. You've spent time there and you actually like America and Americans. So it's relevant to you.
I'm very lucky. I've traveled to 65 countries. I've been to the United States 11 times. So traveling is my first love. It really is. And, you know, I've seen a lot, and it's not to brag. It's just that's something that I've proactively chosen to do with my life. whenever I can, I go overseas. So, that's just.
I need a big red pause button. I'm sorry. Someone is begging to get schooled in economics. Beatrice Nicholson, photography isn't actually producing anything of intrinsic value, though. Intrinsic value is a worthless concept. There is no such thing as intrinsic value. Value is in the eye of the beholder. I have paid for some of Carly's photographs, and I think I got a bargain. I think I paid far less than what they were worth. I have in business paid for photographs many times before in order to sell products or to do various things. Companies spend an absolute fortune on photographs. Are you saying that every single one of those people is wrong? I suggest, Beatrice, that your comprehension of where value comes from is wrong, and you need to actually understand the concept of perceived value as opposed to this nebulous idea of intrinsic value, which can never actually be demonstrated outside of perception. So anyway, there endeth the economic lesson. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Might I mention that this entire world that we live in...
Now my wife wants to get in on that as well.
I'm sorry, but whoever that person was, I paid Carly's invoice and I would have paid more than 5 times what she charged us for. They were brilliant photos and it was worth every cent.
There you go. All right, let's move on. So some people don't understand basic economics and it really pisses me off.
Just on that, Beatrice, the entire world revolves around photography. My photos are what make businesses millions and millions of dollars. So unless you're telling me that those photos are now worthless, you wouldn't have the economic climate we have and the very capitalist society we have without photographers like me. So you're welcome.
Yeah.
Where were we?
No, we've all just piled on. Sorry, Beatrice. We'll all get off you one at a time now. We just had a big stacks on. Okay, so where we were up to, you were talking about the fact, I diverted you actually. You were just mentioning that you were paying attention to the US election and I diverted you and you were talking about travel, the fact that you have seen a bit of the world. Al and I agree it is actually time for her to increase her prices for sure. And we've told her that, not before we paid the invoice. Obviously, we waited till after we'd paid our invoice. But yes, she needs to increase her prices. I would
if Victorians had money.
Yeah, well, that's right. So anyway, let's get her out of the diversion. You were kind of watching this 2-week lockdown became a long-term lockdown. The US election was coming up.
Yeah,
that's where we were up to before I diverted you.
100%. And I don't know how to play this cool. I'm a massive nerd. I really am. Like, I am someone that's heavily invested in YouTube consumption, book consumption, podcasts, audiobooks. Like, it's just me. And I think that's come about because as an entrepreneur, I predominantly am on my own most of the day. So I usually have something on for some kind of noise and not necessarily paying attention all the time, but you absorb things whether consciously or subconsciously. So anyway, so I was very invested in that. So there was a few things that started sort of setting off alarm bells. And, I already had a following of around 10,000 from my prior company. So those people knew me, they knew about me, they knew who I was. So I was talking to a crowd of my peers, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I started speaking up and I was very vocal. And every time there was like a little bit of a red flag that sort of just made me very uncomfortable, I would touch on things and I would correlate across to things that have happened in history. Not like everyone's very quick to jump to World War II and Hitler, but I always try and bring it over to something a little less egregious.
Yeah, a little bit less polarizing.
Yeah, as soon as you go down that road, it's alarmist and you just lose people. So, but then I find that when I start speaking about recent dictatorships and recent socialist downfalls, people don't know what I'm talking about because very few people are not really across world affairs, which is fine, but you got to pick and choose your arguments. Anyway, so I had been very vocal about this. It's not a new thing for me. It just so happened when those videos went viral, all of a sudden I had this huge audience, like overnight, 40,000 people jumped on. And then people started making assertions as to who I was and going through my Instagram and trying to figure out who the hell is this chick. And so this all happened in 5 days. And I think that's really important to consider. 5 days of this, I put up the video and then by day 5, I'm exiled to oblivion. And so what happened was I did a couple of news clips in the first 2 days and people had been going through my social media and any prior conversations they'd had with me and were screenshotting things. Now, I'm not someone that struggles to articulate herself and I do have some contentious points of view at times. And that just comes from my own world experience. I understand that to some people I might be a bit alien. but that's because my life has been anything other than simple and boring.
Average. Mm.
Yeah, so, I understand that. And, given up, I didn't grow up in Australia either. I've traveled a lot. There's a lot of people that understandably might not understand where I'm coming from.
Mm.
So people were screenshotting conversations they may have had with me in DMs or comments I had left. And this person was grabbing those screenshots. And then, you know how it is when there's no context, you can paint things to be whatever you like. And I think I was a racist. Then I was this person. Then I was this person. Like, you name a sledge, it was thrown at me.
Well, look, I found out just recently, apparently I'm a Nazi. I wasn't aware of that. I had to jump online and buy some merchandise because I literally don't have a single piece of Nazi paraphernalia in my home. But apparently that's what I am. So you're absolutely right. People just love to throw the labels around.
It's actually bizarre. As someone who is a keen, I shouldn't say enthusiast. That I don't know if that's a bad thing to say when we talk about these things, but be called sorry.
Carly, can you pause and read this comment, please? Because you need to read this.
That speech from Carly, she spoke for thousands of self-employed people. I bawled my eyes out, and then finally someone had said everything I felt. Thank you, Eileen. Thank you. And just on that, I think that's why it achieved the virality that it did. It's not, people weren't sharing the story because it was me. They were sharing it because I had articulated how they were feeling. And I think that kind of authenticness flows out of you when you're not aware that there's an audience. It wasn't scripted. I wasn't on TV. It was just me in my bedroom, distressed, alone, frustrated, and it just fell out, And that is a level of authenticity that you will never see outside of these situations, because for the most part, we're very careful what we do. We're very careful what we say, and you certainly don't see that on the mainstream media. Everything is very carefully scripted. So I think that's why it achieved 40 million views, which to this, I'm sure it's more than that now because it's on every platform and people have screenshot it and saved it, and it's, God knows where it is. But I never planned that, put it that way. But so essentially what happened was, after this person had attacked me and put her lens on it, shall we say. I like to talk in photographer puns and photographer analogies, so forgive me. But this person has a very different outlook on current affairs to myself. And so I'm mortal enemy number one. And I think it also doesn't help that I'm a young female who's articulate, smart, educated, and not ugly. I'm not going to say I'm not, but I'm not ugly.
This is the thing that blows my mind, and we saw it with you. I'm convinced that this is that you're another example, but we see it with people like Peter Credlin. We see it with people like Bindi Cole-Chocker. We see it with so many women who, if you had the right politics, you would be celebrated, right? And you would be celebrated because you're a strong, outspoken woman, right? But because your politics is wrong, suddenly you're not. You're persona non grata if you're lucky. In your case, you were a persona non grata until they finally went, oh, no, she's having an impact. We better actually actively try and tear her down. And there's a savagery. There's a level of savagery that seems to be directed at women in these sorts of moments that look, I've had some nasty stuff said about me when I spoke at the very first anti-lockdown protest on Anzac Day 2020. Yeah, I mean, my inbox was nasty for a while. But there's this added level of savagery directed at women. And I almost feel like it's because certain political groups believe they own women. They own that vote. You're supposed to support us because you're a woman. And there's this outrage that they have when a woman actually thinks for herself and comes to a different conclusion.
And I think that's the issue as well. Like I'm not easily swayed, and I step into my own power. I don't need someone to parrot for me. I don't need someone to make me feel comfortable. I have zero issue saying exactly how I think and feel. And that to most people can be quite off-putting. It's not usual that you have someone that has a very healthy self-esteem. As a matter of fact, that's frowned upon these days. We need to have vulnerabilities. We need to feel oppressed or victimized and come from this place of like lifelong instability and crisis. That's not me. Sorry, I've got my shit together. I don't apologize for it. And that's what I realized very quickly is this person who had gone to town on me. And so they put up a couple of screenshots, and there's one that I just want this on the record because it was funny, but also not funny how it was manipulated. So I had a very long conversation with someone who prior to the conversation turning, was telling me how much they looked up to me and how much they were inspired by me and they loved my work and they couldn't wait to be mentored by me. And then something came out. It was, I can't exactly remember what the turning point was, but it was something to do with, it was a bit of an SJW thing. And I was like, well, no, sorry, I disagree. And then as soon as I disagreed, it was like, oh, you're mortal enemy number one. Oh, it was about pronouns in bios.
Oh, yeah.
It was about pronouns. And she said to me, you haven't put your pronouns in yet. And I was like, no, and I don't intend to. That was the turning point. And very offensive, very, very offensive. And so the conversation turned. So literally prior to that point, you know, sending me praise, telling me all these wonderful, glorious things. And all of a sudden I disagreed. And then the conversation very quickly descended into chaos around the lockdown. And I said to her, look, you know, we're clearly not going anywhere. You're allowed to have your opinion. I'll have mine. I hope you have a great night. And she wasn't happy with that. And anyway,
you're not allowed to have your opinion. Who do you think you are?
Not if you disagree. Not if you disagree. You know, it's all about inclusivity until you disagree, and then you're a Nazi.
Yeah.
So so basically what happened was at the end of it, she's like giving me this long-winded speech, and then writes, by the way, I have a science degree. And I was just being a sassy little mole. Yeah. And I wrote back, and I have a psychology degree. Like, I was being facetious.
Yeah.
I was joking. And since we're on that, I don't know whether, they're over here. I actually am enrolled in a bachelor degree of psychological science. And I ended up deferring it because it is so left-leaning that I couldn't stomach it. I was like, I only have to do 18 more months to get my degree. But I was like, I don't know if I've got the brain capacity.
If I can survive that. Yeah.
So it's not, and so basically that set the tone that I was this pathological liar. Yeah. Because apparently we can't have senses of humor these days. Yeah. And then they'd found another screenshot here and another screenshot there. So now I'm like this terrible person, and everyone's coming onto my page and telling me how much of a piece of shit I am, how I should kill myself. And, you know, I don't know if you guys have ever had an onslaught of feminists, but I think they're particularly vicious when they're attacking women. Like, I've never seen a feminist be kind to a woman they disagree with. Yeah. And so, as fate would have it, an ex-business partner also decides to step into the ring, an ex-business partner who takes funding from the Labor Party, you could say. And this ex-business partner, who had a substantial portion of my business at a time, has decided to leak private documents and declare that they were public, and painted a picture that I was this terrible Alan Bond, Christopher Skase person. And,
good. So you've got hundreds of millions of dollars then. I'm so relieved. Could you just slip me some? I'll send you my bank details.
I've got a G6 in my backyard.
Yeah, excellent. And
I've been flying between here and Mallorca every day, you know?
Yeah, nice. I knew there was something shady about you.
100%. So I just read a comment. I wouldn't be proud of a uni degree. I don't know. I'm pretty proud of mine. Thanks. I've already got one. Yeah. But, you know, whatever.
Let people be happy.
do whatever you want. Like, anyway, I'm getting off track. So this video that this particular individual put up then naturally got eyes of other said individual who has a substantial following. And if you're wondering why I'm being very careful with my words, there is currently legal proceedings around this. So, you know, I'm not going to say anything that could jeopardize any of those positions. So, and naturally, the media was like, brilliant. And I think people underestimate how much of a hold our current government has on the media down here. Like, it's significant. And it's no shock to me that a video that I put up very clearly articulating the incompetence of our government that's getting 40 million views and being shown on key news outlets in the US and Canada and Europe. That was amazing. What? All of a sudden they were like, this is too much. This girl's got to go. We've got to take her down. And so they did. And even though there were elements of truth in the story, it was very cleverly key moments of context were removed to then paint me as some kind of business monster. And then, of course, because everything comes in threes, which is wonderful, a person I don't know started a GoFundMe. And if you want to add petrol into the fire, have a GoFundMe. It's brilliant. And this GoFundMe within 12 hours got to 60,000. And I begged the person who set it up to turn it off. I begged, and they didn't. Eventually they did. But I knew as soon as there was money involved, I was like, oh, dear Lord. And the wonderful thing about this is I have all the screenshots. I have all the comment threads. I have all the paperwork, but that doesn't matter. So when the media came for me, I sat there with like piles and piles of stuff. And I won't go too much into it, but reporter number one took the stuff that I gave them, put it aside, and never looked at it. They already had their narrative. They just wanted the footage to go with the story. And the narrative was, woman is going viral. She's a con artist. She can't be trusted. The video loses credibility. Boom. That's what they wanted.
Now, can I pause for a moment here? Because I want people to, there's a reason why I invited you on, and there's a reason why I think that what we're talking about now is valuable to everyone listening. This isn't just, oh, here's an interesting story. I mean, yes, it is an interesting story. I want to drive this point home. This could literally happen to anyone, because what Carly did was sit down and make a video and pour her heart out in a way that resonated with people. Carly did not make that video go viral. The person who creates a video does not make it go viral. It's the audience that looks at it and says, I want to pass this on. The audience makes it go viral. The public made Carly's video go viral, and everything else flowed straight out of that. So number one, this can happen literally to anybody. Number two, understand that the media are, even when they paint, how do I put this? The media only ever set you up as a good guy in order to later on tear you down as the bad guy, right? That's it. Once they've already done the piece about, oh, this poor woman or this wonderful person or what have you, the only place to go from there is down. And sooner or later, one of these gutter journalists is going to come crawling around looking for a nice story. And they don't read anything. They don't research anything. Understand, these journalists, particularly if we're talking about, these sort of nightly current affair things, they've got to churn out a story a day. They don't have time. And I've actually spoken to one before who admitted to me that partway through producing some stories, they realized they were wrong about that story, but they had to go through with it anyway because they had a deadline and they didn't have another story to run. So sometimes they actually run stories that even they know are bullshit because of the pressure that's on them and the deadlines and just trying to pay bills and everything. It's not right, but it's how it is. So you had the social media mob come for you. And right now, what we're talking about now is the moment when finally the mainstream media mob came for you as well. Yeah.
And it came thick and fast. And the interesting thing is, and I think what people fail to understand is when you're getting a video of that kind of virality, and, I'm the first person to admit there are plenty of people in the past that I have pissed off for many reasons. Either I've turned a guy down, or I've said no to someone in a business deal, or, I've unscrupulously told someone to get fucked at some point. I'm just a regular person. Yeah. But they all love to come out of the woodwork, when things like this are going on. And I saw all the names coming up, and I was like, "Of course you are. Of course you are." Well, you have to laugh, right? Because I'm just like, you couldn't wait. You couldn't wait for this moment. So essentially, the way they took me down is they were saying that I had started this GoFundMe for myself to go and pay back all these debts from a business that had liquidated. And I'm not going to give people a business overview, but a liquidated business, that's it. It's gone. There is no debt. So, but the mainstream media ran with this.
I do want you to add one more piece of information. How long did the business succeed and survive for before it went into liquidation?
10 years.
Okay. So more than 90% of businesses, I think it's about 95% of businesses, fail in the first 5 years. So you were already, just to get to 5 years, you were in the 5%. To get beyond that, by the time you get to 10 years, let's say you're in the 2 to 3%. Most successful business entrepreneurs And then finally, you went into liquidation. I want that context, because people that have only ever worked for themselves or have never run a business before often don't understand that. By the time you get to 10 years, you are a successful business owner. Even if it ends in liquidation, you've defied the odds massively already. Anyway, sorry, continue.
No, and I want to also clarify something, because, you know, this is the first time I'm openly speaking about it in a public forum. I chose liquidation. It didn't fail. I chose to liquidate the company. We had been very successful, and it had grown, and just the nature of the environment we're in the fitness activewear space. There are so many competitors. The US dollar had dropped, meaning we were paying way higher. Our margins had shrunk, and there was a lot of different things. And I had run the business for 10 years, and I was burnt out. I was done. And my relationship with my business partner, who was a silent partner, they didn't do anything in the business day to day. That had also become quite strained, and I was frustrated, and I had made the decision that I didn't want to do this anymore. We had two options. Either they go out and find a fashion designer to come in and do what I do, or we just call it a day. And and one thing I'll say is that's 10 years of my life. That's my baby. I started that company when I was 25. I built it from nothing. You know, like I built that company through a crowdfunding campaign, and it blew up with the rise of Instagram. So to make that decision to close it was gut-wrenching. And to be honest, I'm still not over it, because I closed it and then walked into a pandemic. Like that wasn't planned. And so
right when you're trying to rebuild from nothing, you've gone to zero thinking it's okay, I'll rebuild, I'll start something new, and then you've come straight into this.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting, because when you have context to this story, it's nowhere near as egregious and terrible as people are making it sound, but that doesn't matter. The mainstream media doesn't give a shit about context. It's like there was a perfect storm, there was a perfect story, let's knock this chick down. And so essentially what happened was a friend of mine, I use the term friend loosely, obviously, but this friend then went on to say that I had this debt and that I hadn't paid her, and they asked for the money from the GoFundMe, and it just escalated out of control. And as it all was unfolding, this is within 5 days, I'd barely slept, barely eaten, and I got accosted by a current affair. My neighbor said they were out the front of my house for 7 hours waiting for me, like the fucking paparazzi. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. And I was out of my mind. I was out of my mind. You know, I was not in a good headspace. And, you know, I don't know if anyone can relate, but have you had 40 million people watch your video and then tell you what they think and feel of you? It's not good. You know, there was a lot of positives, but there was an equally amount of negatives. And by the time that video aired on ACA, my life was done. Like I was getting death threats. I had people doing all sorts of horrendous things. But the worst thing was the rape threats. You know, it's one thing to be told to go kill yourself. It's another thing to say, I'm coming to your house and I'm going to rape you. And some wonderful person put my personal address in a Facebook comment thread. And then I had people rocking up my house. I had letters coming to my house. I literally was fucking terrified. I thought that at any given time, someone's going to knock on my door. I'm going to be like beaten up, raped. Like I didn't know, you know, and when you're in that kind of spiral and panic, nothing makes sense. And the world was closing in on me. Like for a good week, I was basically catatonic. I didn't leave my house. I had all the blinds down. It was dark. I didn't eat. And people were applauding that. You know, people were grateful that I had been taken down. People were grateful that I was being told to kill myself. People were stoked that people were telling me to get raped. And, you know, I made the mistake of reading some of the comments on a current affair post on Instagram. Like they literally have a photo of my face with the words COVID con on it, you know, and all I could think of is like, what are people from high school thinking? What are my ex-boyfriends thinking? Like, you know, and it is what it is. Like there's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I can do about it. The narrative has been set. And Topher is one of the people that was so kind to like guide me through this, because I'm not going to lie. I don't want to take this conversation down a turn, but I thought the only way out was to take my life. That's where I was. I thought the only way out of this is to end it, you know, because all I could think of is like there is no coming back from this. Unless I leave the country and change my name, how the hell do I show my face again? It was dark. And I had to wait, like everyone's like, why isn't she saying anything? Where is she? And it's like, well, what it felt like was I was standing in the middle of the MCG with people just screaming at me. Who was going to listen to me? So you have to be quiet. You have to let things die down. You have to let things just sort of de-escalate. And then I made the choice to speak out. But having been through that, and, I don't want to make this conversation all about myself, but I saw the way the media took my story and deliberately. Sorry,
pause. I literally invited you on here because I want people to hear this story. So please just tell the story.
So the people who made the comments about me, there was definitely elements of truth. So I want to be very careful. I'm not painting myself as a victim. I'm not a victim. I don't want pity and I don't want sympathy. I think that's very clear to put that out there. I do have a failed business. The business was in liquidation. There were debts with the business because you can't close a business with debts. That's just not how it worked. It was a company. And I guess, Topher, maybe that's something I should touch on very quickly because, the average person doesn't go through liquidation. Yeah. Liquidation is a complicated process. You appoint lawyers to come in. You are no longer the director of the company. You step down and they manage the business's assets and debts and figure out what happens. So, there's a few myths that circulated that I think I'll debunk very quickly if you don't mind.
Please do.
The first one was that I have $400,000 worth of debt and that there are these trails of small businesses behind me that I took money from. The majority of that debt was investment debt from my business partner. So yes, he did lose money, but he opted to invest that into the business. And as any investor or any business owner knows, you invest and you understand risk. You don't invest money that you don't have. Yeah. So my business partner is very wealthy, very successful, and he made that investment understanding that there was a chance it wouldn't pay off or there was a chance it would.
Yep.
So that was the first thing. And the Daily Mail was the first one to run that story, COVID con, $400,000 worth of debt. And I was like, okay, can someone just look up what liquidation means? Just anyone. Yeah. Anyone. Just literally Google it right now. Yeah. What is liquidation? And then you'll see instantly there is no such thing. Once you liquidate, there's no debt. There is one small business that did lose a little bit of money and it was under $1,000. And obviously I feel shit about that. But once you are removed as the director of the company, I no longer have control of the bank accounts. There's nothing I can do. And that's what people don't understand. The liquidator comes in and takes full control. And then, so the next one, which I think was fun, Topher, we've had a joke about this because you're a cars guy. I'm a car person.
Yeah.
And the narrative is that I have this luxury car and that if I was this broke, why haven't I got rid of the car? For the record, I have a 2015 Jeep Wrangler. If that's luxury, guys, you got to up your standards.
Which, by the way, you couldn't pay me to drive, just by the way. That is not my kind of car at all. And we have to tell the story. We have to tell the story of what happened in your car when you came and did the photograph. So this is before all of this blew up. I mentioned earlier on, and just for those that have joined us since then, my wife and I met Carly. My wife discovered Carly's photographs through Instagram. She's a freaking amazing photographer. We engaged her to come and do a new set of family photos, which are the best family photos we've ever had. And on that particular photo shoot, Carly's fuel tank was pretty low by the time she arrived. And she parked on a hill with the Jeep facing down a hill. And apparently the Jeep Wrangler has an issue with where the fuel pickup point is and where the fuel pump is or where it gets the fuel from. That, if you don't have a lot of fuel in that tank and you park it on a hill facing down, it ain't starting again. You are not getting that. You can't even bump start it because there's still no fuel coming through the lines. You've got to go and get a jerry can and put more into the fuel tank. So if that's a luxury car, well, you can keep that, okay? You can keep your luxury car, Carly.
What a thing to happen on like in front of your clients. Do you know what I mean? Like, talk about professionalism. I was mortified.
Jody is saying, I'm looking for a Jeep Wrangler right now. Are you selling?
Well, do you know what? Do you know what the wonderful thing is? And it's bizarre timing because everything around this, everything is just bizarre. You know, I mean, we had an earthquake 2 days ago. Like, I'm half expecting dinosaurs next week. Because of COVID, there's a lot of issues with getting new vehicles in, and I don't know whether that's a freight thing or production, whatever.
Yeah.
But it just so happens that secondhand cars have gone up, and my Jeep is worth almost as much as what I bought it for. I don't know how that works, but it's got 200,000 Ks on it. It's like it's not a new car.
Yeah.
But
anyway,
but
sorry,
anyway.
I've sidetracked the conversation. So this narrative came out that you had a luxury car and all that kind of nonsense.
Yeah, it was. And oh, she's got this luxury car, she's rich, she's all this sort of stuff. And this is what I mean. People just went through my social media, screenshot photos, and put their spin on it. And there's nothing you can do with that. People are going to believe what they're going to believe. And I can sit here and I can go through every single comment and be like, that's incorrect. There's truth to that, but this is the truth, blah, 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 blah. The point of the story was they wanted me so discredited, so silenced that I wouldn't dare to speak up again.
Well, I don't think it's too much to say. Many among them would have been happy if you'd killed yourself.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't actually think that that's an overstatement.
The key instigator, one of the people with the biggest platforms, did make a joke about that.
Yeah.
So, and this person is continuing to do this to other people, no longer me, but this person is doing this on the daily. Just trying to...
It's that person's MO.
Yeah. And this is how this person builds a platform. And the other person, and like I said, guys, if you're coming in halfway through this conversation, I'm being careful. I never say names, but this other person has built themselves a social media following off tearing me down. And you've got to ask yourself, long term, yes, you've gotten another 10,000 followers on Instagram, but are they a crowd that you can then monetize? Are they going to buy your services or your products? Probably not.
And what kind of experience are you going to have? I mean, I love the audience that I've got, and I've been building it for 12 years, and I've got guys that have stuck with me through thick and thin all the way through. People are telling me my sound's playing up. Sorry, I'm just going to, there's nothing I can do. People that have stuck with me through thick and thin, and my audience, besides my own family, my audience are one of my favorite parts of my life, right? They send me messages, they send me tips, we talk to each other, they comment on stuff, we have conversations. Imagine having an audience built on hate. And where does that leave you as the person who then has to interact with that audience? I couldn't fathom that.
It's really sad, and like the last thing I want to do is sit here and paint those people in a negative light myself, because that would make me a hypocrite as well. But I find it alarming that people actively seek out that kind of outrage, like it's the voyeurism that we have in us, it's like that whole fly on the wall. And it seems fairly innocent to just be someone that's sort of reading the comment threads and being like, ooh, wow, look what's going on social media. But at the end of the day, we're talking about someone's life. And,
that's right.
That's no joke. And this is not just myself, but we're seeing a lot of this during COVID now. The rhetoric is all about the people who are in opposition to you wanting their lives to be ended. We're dehumanizing the value of those people that we disagree with. And that to me is incredibly terrifying. Yeah. So once that hatchet job, I guess we'll say, unfolded, everything was on the table. So, someone was like, oh, she went to Bali. She had this luxury holiday in Bali and, lived up large. And I was like, I was fucking paid to go there, guys. I'm a photographer. I take photos of real estate. I went there to take photos of the luxury accommodation. Like, if anyone knows me, Topher, I don't know if we've talked about Bali. I hate Bali. I despise Bali. Yeah. The only reason I got to Bali is because I was paid. So when people are like, oh, she's living this luxury life in Bali, I was like, I came back with typhoid. What?
Well, look, we haven't spoken about Bali specifically, but I know from what we have talked about with your travels before, you are one of these people that loves to travel and actually experience the local culture. You're not going to go somewhere like Bali and then be like, I'll just stick myself in a nice luxury hotel that's going to be, exactly the same as all the other luxury hotels I could stay in anywhere else in the world. So no, I can certainly agree. It is not consistent with what I know of you that you would go to Bali and spend a fortune on some luxury accommodation. That does not sound like you. Since
we're going down this road of embarrassing me, I feel like I might tell this story because it's fun and it ties into COVID. So guys, you can laugh at my expense and feel free to tell me how much of a retard I am sorry, I shouldn't say the word, how terrible I am in the comments. So I closed my company in November, and on the back of that, I guess you could say it was a revenge company that I started, because I was like, I know what I'm going to do. And I went over, during this transition, I had already been working as a photographer, and that was the part of the narrative that also got missed. I've been working as a photographer for an agency since 2018, and I was doing that on the down low whilst trying to figure out what to do with my company. And that's why the end result was liquidation, because I was like, I can't do both. I'm dying here. I can't run a business and work somewhere else. Anyway, so that all closed, and I was working really hard to get new clients for photography, because I was working at this agency and I'm trying to build up clientele. And this amazing lady reached out to me and said, I've got a villa in Bali that I need professional photos for. How do you feel about going to Bali? And I was like, I've been once and I hated it. And she's like, you'll love it. You'll love where I am. They've got this what do they call them? Villas. And it's up in the hills of Bali. So not the touristy bit. She's like, it's in the hills. It's beautiful. You'll love it. You can stay a week. And there's a housekeeper that will cook all your meals, and off you go. And so I rang up a friend of mine who loves Bali, who's been like 7 times. And I said, hey, how do you feel about a free trip to Bali? All you have to do is pay your airfares. And boom, we're on the plane. So we land in Bali. And day one, I go sourcing, because I've always manufactured in China. And I thought, while I'm here in Bali, I'm going to look at some new suppliers. So I did that. And that was day from hell. To this day, Topher, I do not understand why people like Bali. That traffic, why?
Denpasar is awful. I will defend. I won't defend Denpasar anywhere near there. I will defend Nusa Lombok. It's one of the lesser islands. Yeah, it's one of the lesser islands off the coast. It's not one of the big two. I mean, it's got a number of resorts on it, but you only have to get off the beach, and then you're in genuine local Balinese traditional sort of territory. So I really enjoyed. So my wife and I we honeymooned on Nusa Lombok for a week, and I really enjoyed that. And it was just I would happily go back there. I've been to Bali, mainland Bali, since then. And I have no particular affection for the place. To be honest, there's too many Australians.
Correct.
There's too many Aussies.
I'm pressing the pause button because we have a comment here from Gail Murphy, who has said, doesn't liquidation result in debt being paid back, maybe 20 cents on the dollar? That's why people are pissed. Gail, that is incorrect. Let me tell you how liquidation works. If a company is liquidated, if the company doesn't have any assets or liquid cash, the debt is wiped. It's not bankruptcy. You're confusing bankruptcy. So bankruptcy is personal and liquidation is against the company. So when you go bankrupt, if you were to then go and get a job where you're earning over, I think it's 70,000, Topher, correct me if I'm wrong, 70,000.
I don't know bankruptcy law, so I can't comment.
I believe that, yeah. So if you have personally gone bankrupt and you get a wage, I think it's over 65 or 70, I could be wrong on that, then you will be required to start paying back your debt. But with liquidation, with a company, the whole point of having a company is to protect the individual. That's why you have a PTY Ltd. It's not personal debt. It has nothing to do with me personally. It's a company. So no, Gail, I don't owe anyone any money.
I want to clarify this though, because Gail has asked a follow-up question. So all debtors get paid? No, they don't. No. The debtors in this particular case especially were investors. Investors understand that their money is at risk. They are investing money in the hope of making more money, but their capital that they put in is at risk. So business works very, very differently to your own personal debts. It's not like you borrowed money from the bank to buy a car or anything like that. It's a completely different world. Think of the business as its own person. It is its own legal entity. It is a legal person. That is what owes the money. And when that ceases to exist and gets wound up, then no, the money doesn't get paid back. The money's not there to pay back. But this is how business works, and it's happening all the time, all around you. Unfortunately, it's happening a lot right now because people have been pushed to the point of business failure. But like I said before, I believe it's 95% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. To get to 10 years in business, that's actually success. You actually had, Carly, you had a successful business that you then wound up. That's actually your business history. Not you have a failed business.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people seem to forget that in that same year that I liquidated, other huge retailers also went under. Kiki K went under, Jeans West went under, Roger David went under, Harris Scarf went into administration. Like, there were so many people in the retail sector that liquidated in 2019. And the data 2020, 2021 isn't reported yet, but there are everyday retailers getting knocked over. And I think there was an accusation in there that I phoenixed my company, and I didn't. Firstly,
you don't have a clothing business. I want to bring this up here because this is a great example of the kind of stupidity that I've been putting up with for 12 years, and Carly has been introduced to this world much more recently than that, but in a very, very spectacular way. Crisis actor interviews a crisis actor. Well, listen, actors get paid. So I'm looking forward to getting my check from whoever the hell employed me to be a crisis actor. That would be really, really nice. I've spent my entire life. I started doing videos in 2009 on the water supply situation into Melbourne when we were in stage 3A water restrictions. And literally from my very first video, I've been accused of being a paid shill for different people. Along the way, apparently, I've been a paid shill for the Greens. That one kind of caught me off guard. I didn't quite see that one coming. For the Liberal Party, yeah, a little bit more predictable. For Big Oil, apparently I'm getting lots of money from them, which, guys, please send it my way.
Wouldn't it be nice if it was true?
Look, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it just be fantastic? But this, and Cameron, you can be offended if you like. This is one of the laziest points of view to take on someone that you disagree with. It is the laziest form of argument and speaks very, very poorly of your own critical acumen.
And that's where we're at. Everyone just argues ad hominem these days. It's about attacking character, resorting to name calling. Very few people will attack the argument. They attack the messenger. And that's the easiest way to lose an argument.
Yeah.
As soon as you go for someone's character and their looks or whatever it is, boom, you lost.
You've lost the argument. You're admitting that you've lost the argument at that point. Steve is reminding me, yes, I'm getting lots of money from Honda because this product placement right here, that's worth a fortune. I mean, Honda are making so much money out of me right now.
Maybe I should put things in view so I can be like, hey, sponsor me.
Exactly.
Casio. Is it a Casio? Yeah. Casio.
There you go. Casio keyboards sponsor. There we go. All right. We're all getting rich now.
I wish that were the case. But, so anyway, let's tell a Bali story because it's actually quite funny. And it's a sign of the times. It's a sign of things to come. So actually, what happened the week before Bali? It's really funny. And I promise this is going to entertain you for a good 2 minutes. I was attempting to become a pro skater. I wasn't, but I was into skateboarding, longboarding. Okay. And, typical me, I like to think my skill set's a lot better than it is. And I was doing this trick on this longboard and I literally slipped and hit the concrete. And I thought I shattered my femur, but I just bounced and I had a bruise from my knee up to the back of my butt. And I make the joke that is the moment 2020 took hold. I swear to God, I cracked us into a different universe because, right? And for anyone that's interested, I might show the photo later. But anyway, and then I had to go to Bali and I had this massive bruise and it was all sorts of things. So I feel like that is the indicative point in time where shit just went bizarre.
Shit went wrong for all of us.
All of us. It's my fault.
It's all your fault, Carly. It's all your fault.
100% my fault. It's like, how does someone fall from standing up to the ground and have the kind of sustained injury that I did? It makes no sense, but do you want to see the photo? Should I bring it up? I feel like I need to show it just for context.
If you can show it to the screen or you can email it to me and I'll put it up on the screen, but whichever one's easier.
I'll keep telling the story so I don't waste everyone's time. I'm conscious that this is going to be a very boring discussion. So anyway, I'm in Bali. I go to the suppliers, then I shoot the luxury place that we're in, and I'm bored. And I hate Seminyak and I hate Kuta. And I say to my friend, there's a volcano in Java that has blue flames. We should go there.
Sounds good.
And my friend is like, you're right. That sounds like a way better idea. So we go and get mopeds or Vespers, whatever they're called. And bless her cotton socks, the lady at our Bali accommodation is like, oh, no. You don't do that. That's a silly move. You wouldn't drive these to Java. Don't. And we're like, we won't. Of course we won't. We did. So here's said brew.
I think you're getting Java mixed up because Java's a separate island. You're
Correct.
talking about Oh, okay.
No.
So So you actually thought you were going to ride them to Java. Okay, all right.
And we did.
Well, this got interesting.
There's the brews. Hang on. Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, that's spectacular. You did that from standing up.
I literally went from standing up to on my side, and that's
a gift.
The moment.
Yeah, that's a gift. Not everyone's got that skill.
That's the moment, guys, that shit hit the fan. I'm sorry. That is the turning point. So anyway, we get these Vespers, and we Google Maps it because that's what every logical person does. And Google Maps tells us it's a 4-hour drive to Java from where we are. And so, no, it's not. It turns out Google Maps is acutely wrong in this discussion. And we were there in March, just as the pandemic's unfolding. And so monsoon season, even better. I told you this is a great story.
Sorry, can I just pause? I'm now just thinking what was going through that woman's mind as she was talking to these Aussie girls who were absolutely sure that they were going to ride a moped to Java.
To hike a volcano. So we get on these mopeds that aren't like particularly powerful, and we discover that only by trying to go up very steep hills. It wouldn't go up.
Yeah. The moped ends up riding you.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so we get halfway up. We're like in the middle of Bali, right? We're dead smack bang in the middle, and a monsoon hits, and we've got no choice but to soldier on. So we're dripping wet. It's miserable, and we're laughing because it's kind of funny. And so we drive all the way to the north of Bali, and so then start descending back down and coming into Java. And Google Maps told us it was 4 hours. It took 11, thanks to the monsoon and our mopeds. And so we get on the ferry, go across to Java, and Java is not Bali. Java is very
Indonesia. Yeah, Bali is an island within Indonesia.
Yeah, it's completely different.
Yeah.
It's not tourist friendly whatsoever. So we're trying to find new clothes. Being Westerners, we don't fit into any of the clothes because we're ginormous and they're all very petite and small. I end up buying men's Adidas clothes that are like still too tight, and we had to go climb the volcano because naturally you climb the volcano in the middle of the dark waiting for the first bit of dawn to catch these blue flames. And now, so we've been Googling, and these blue flames look spectacular. I'm a photographer. Naturally, I'm like, this is my moment. I'm going to take something that's going to be in National Geographic. It would make sense.
Sure. Yeah.
So we go to a hotel to try and wash up, and it turns out it's literally the scene from some kind of Banged Up Abroad. It's literally the set of The Shining. It was terrifying. And we vacate very quickly, and we find another hotel and wash, and then get on our trusty mopeds and go up a volcano.
Yeah.
A friend of mine ended up rolling down said volcano with moped, so not great. She was fine.
Not ideal. No, not ideal.
I told you this is a good story. It keeps going. We get to the top of the volcano, or the top of the track, and then we have to hike. And then we're hiking up this volcano. We're wearing these gas masks, which is also indicative of what was to come. And I'm trying to breathe whilst hiking in the middle of the night after not sleeping, this horrible sulfur gas. It smells like rotten eggs. And my lungs burning, and like my legs are killing me, and it's like raining, and all shit's just falling apart. Anyway, we then start descending into the crater of this volcano. That is so unsafe. So unsafe. There's literally steam coming out of the crater, and I'm thinking, this could blow. This is very stupid. We get down there. It's not blue flames. There's like these gas pipes. And when the sulfur dioxide, I'm not a chemist, forgive me if that's wrong, but when the sulfur air or the sulfur gas hits something in the air, the flames are like blue, like they would be on your gas stove.
Yeah,
that's the blue flames.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I was.
So, yeah, you went to all of that effort.
Correct.
To photograph some gas pipes.
Literally don't have any photos of it because it was that. Anyway.
No. You didn't even take other photos of the volcano just because you were there? No, I don't blame you after that trauma getting there. I don't blame you. That's yeah. Okay.
So the reason I thought this was worth telling is at some point, some of my haters would come watch this video and get to this point where I had this luxury holiday in Bali. You'll see it was anything but. Anyway, we get on trusty mopeds and we drive all the way back. It's another 12-hour drive, and you can imagine, like, we are done. We are not in good frames of mind. Yeah. I make the very terrible choice to stop at it on the side of the road market because I'm starving, and I buy myself a nashi pear. Said nashi pear is
fresh fruit shouldn't be too much of a risk, surely.
You would think for someone as well-traveled as me would not make such a rookie error, but alas, delirious, hungry, it seemed like the right decision. Bit into this nashi pear, it was delicious, ate it. About 90 minutes down the road, I realized I'm not feeling great. Anyway, I'll fast forward the gory details, but let's just say the luxury hotel or luxury villa that we're in was the witness of the most horrific crime scene you've ever seen. And that's all I'll say. I have never excreted so many bodily fluids in such an explosive fashion in my life.
Look, I don't want to add to the viewers' misery, but I almost want to tell my food poisoning story in Colombia. I talk about my trip to Venezuela all the time. I actually had food poisoning the whole way through Venezuela, and it literally took my gut biota about 2 years to recover from one of the most severe episodes of food poisoning. I decided to trust a chicken shop in Medellin that looked like it was a proper store. It wasn't like a little roadside thing. And boy, that was turned out to be one of the biggest gambles of my life. I did not know that bodily fluid could be bright green. I was not aware of that. And I learned. And here's the worst bit. We flew into Venezuela, a country with a toilet paper shortage. You do not want to be you do not want to be in that state in a country with a toilet paper shortage. Just trust me on that. Okay, we better get back to your actual story because I wanted to try and finish what you had there, and then we'll get back to the core story because I want to finish that before we have a loo break.
All right, perfect. Well, I've just realized that one of my biggest fans is in here, Lucky Lance. So, hey, mate, I hope you're great. I hope I'm giving you some fresh content to go and destroy me on YouTube. Looking forward to watching what you say. Lucky Lance is one of the people that loved to destroy me on Facebook. So do your worst, champ. Do your worst. So then we went across back to this villa, and this is just as the COVID issue is really hitting the shit. And a mate back home's like, "Hey, you guys need to come home. Like, things are bad. Like, you need to get on a plane." And then we see that viral video of the women beating each other up for the toilet paper. And meanwhile, I've got typhoid. I've got typhoid, and I'm like, what do you mean there's no toilet paper in Australia? It's not the time to come home. So we ended up getting home, and I managed to get in. And this is just as the borders are starting to shut. And literally, I think about a week later, Scott Morrison shut the borders, and then it was just chaos. And I came back and I've got typhoid, and I couldn't go in the hospital because they think I've got typhoid because I've come from Bali, and that was all horrendous. And then, I get laid off from my job because the lockdowns are happening, and I'm just like, what the shit is going on? And then the rest, as they say, is history. So that's why I thought I'd bring up the Bali story, because it was painted as if I had this like wonderful luxury holiday in Bali, but I came back with typhoid as the souvenir. So but so anyway, that's the interesting thing. So Lance is in here, so we'll say hi to Lance. How you going, champ? He's one of our biggest fans, Topher.
Now, fast forwarding or coming back to where we were before. So you're in the situation where a current affair has tried to destroy you. You had a pile on from the mass media, mainstream media, and from social media. You had someone start a GoFundMe without your permission and then not shut it down till long after you started asking them to do that. And so now we had people like Lance jumping in saying, you're a scammer, you just wanted the money, blah, blah, blah. Let's wind up that aspect of the story, because I think it's very important that people understand, number one, what you did, and then what GoFundMe came out and actually acknowledged publicly. So there's no question about this anymore. Tell us, wind that one up for us.
So with the GoFundMe, the guy who started it, again, I don't know him. I haven't met him, and I do honestly believe he was doing it out of the goodness of his heart. And
He was trying to help.
yeah, absolutely, and it's a very kind thing to do. But the issue is when you got all these eyes on you, people are naturally going to assume the worst, like old mate Lance. And so essentially, what happened was once the story of my company came out, people assumed that this GoFundMe was started by myself to pay back these debts, because I'm this epic scam artist, con artist. And it's like, well, hang on a minute. Did I pay Michael to start this GoFundMe? Or like, none of it made sense, but that was the narrative set. And so I had never, I mean, I went on the Today Show and I discussed this very clearly and very concisely. And I had said from day one that I wasn't interested in having all of this money. That wasn't the purpose of it. And I'd never once asked people to raise money for me. I certainly didn't say that in the videos. And I made the comment that this is way more than I need, and I will start sharing it with a couple of my friends who have businesses that were failing. I filmed a live video in Pokey, Geelong, and I introduced everyone to Sarah and told everyone I was going to be gifting Sarah the money. And then that day is when the A Current Affair hit piece came out. And so I immediately gave the money back to Michael, because I was like, you know what, with all of this heat on me, it doesn't matter what I decide or which business I think is the one that deserves to have some kind of respite. Whatever decision I make at this point will be viewed in poor taste. So all of the money was returned to the guy who set it up. And then GoFundMe, I rang GoFundMe and I told them the situation. And I will say this, GoFundMe were absolutely incredible. They were very, very kind to me. And they were very, very considerate of the nature of the sensitivity of what was going on. And so with GoFundMe, it took quite a while, because when you have that kind of escalation in the media and all these people sort of watching, you got to be really careful. And so we worked really closely, and thankfully it was through GoFundMe that they also worked with the original creator. And we had that mediation, because given the craziness of what was going on, it was best to just deal with them directly. And then wonderfully, GoFundMe worked with Cosboa, which is a small business what's the right word for it? It's like a small business support system that has been doing incredible things for people during COVID. And all that money became grants that people could access through applications. So it did end up going to small businesses, and it was done through a much more organized and administrated circumstance, which is fantastic. And GoFundMe were incredible. They wrote the statement for me that went out. All the money, all the people who championed the GoFundMe and donated were contacted, and they were offered refunds should they prefer them. And I believe most people opted for that business, the business grants, to stay and to stay. So that was wonderful. And it was, it's the best you could have hoped for. So
look, it's an awful situation to find yourself in, and it's one of those moments where once you're in, there's no good way out. There is no good way out. And it's no matter what you do from there, you're going to have people like Lance who are going to decide to try and make a name for themselves off the back of you. And Lance, I look forward to your video about my ex-girlfriend. Number one, because I don't believe you. And number two, because you're absolutely full of shit. So have fun with that. And hey, the more time you spend chasing me, the less time you spend chasing people like Carly. So chase me all you want.
Well, I think people should look into Lance's history, because it's equally as colourful. So
I'm sure that would be very, very interesting. Maybe we should get Friendly Geordies onto Lance's back. What do you reckon?
I think so.
Anyway, so moving on, what we have here is a situation where you simply poured your heart out on social media, and what happened after that was largely out of your control. It was largely other people choosing to do what they did. There came a point, though, where you made the decision that you were going to get back in control of things. So I want to, before we have the toilet break, I want to kind of get to the conversations that we had and the decision that you made in the end that's led to you doing what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was people like Lance who were actively encouraging people to tell me to kill myself and telling people to rape me. And I believe it was either Lance or one of his cohorts that put my personal address online. So as that all unfolded and the incredible barrage of abuse was coming my way, I was very lucky. In the weirdest way, I say this not to be facetious, but I got more support than I could have ever possibly imagined. Like people, like incredibly powerful people reached out to me. I have had more work given to me in the last couple of weeks than I could have ever imagined. It's in the weirdest way, it has been the most wonderful possible thing for my career. I have been connected to some people that I would never have ever dreamed having access to. And it was all of those people who are incredibly successful people, incredibly wealthy people who understand the very real repercussions of a liquidation and understood that what happened was a media takedown. And these people were incredible. And you were also one of those people, Topher, that basically was making sure I didn't kill myself. You know, my phone was calling constantly. People were making sure that I was okay. And then we started having chats. The conversation moved away from what other people were doing to, well, what is Carl's doing? And what is Carl's gonna do? And what do you believe? And it's like, well, do you still believe what you said? And do you believe, you know, and I was like, well, yes. And they're like, okay, well, why aren't you standing up and saying it then? And, you know, you're letting people take your power. You're actively choosing that. And I love some uncomfortable truths. And I think you said something about, you know, you set the narrative. You don't let other people set the narrative. And it was a matter of, do I step into this and do I do what they want me to do, which is kill myself, or do I say no? And I chose no, obviously. And I realized that my message and the 40 million views that I got will only be valuable if I get back up again. And that will set a very strong precedent for anyone that comes after me, because you can throw everything you have at me and you didn't kill me. And if anything, you created a monster. Sorry.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the point you just made is the most important one. Proving to the mob that they can't actually win that way. You know, there's a sort of a truism that I live by. You get more of what you reward and you get less of what you punish. And every time someone, and this is why I hate these big companies that fold every time the mob comes after them. Because if you reward the mob gets bolder. The mob gets more aggressive, right? And the other thing is, as soon as you fold, you've created a rod for your own back. As soon as you give them power, they will come for you every single chance that they can possibly get. And it's basically just going, no, I'm going to be in charge of my own life. You're not going to be in charge of my life. Random person with a keyboard at the other end of the internet somewhere. I'm going to be in charge of my own life. And I think you've set a fantastic example of that. So you came out swinging. I think you waited until GoFundMe released their statement, which put beyond any doubt what had actually happened with the money. You hadn't taken all the money. I think there was a small amount that was used to pay off a debt that was in all of the confusion of what was happening and everything else. You made a decision that you've said to me, you realize now wasn't the best decision, but that's what happened in all of that moment. And the vast majority of the money ended up going, as you said, to help other people and to be available to other people who need it. I want to actually, Francesca asked a good question. How long ago was this? So Francesca's watching. She hasn't seen this, hasn't heard your story or seen this before. So when did all of this go down?
8 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty fresh.
Yeah, very, very fresh. Now, I want to, just before we go to the break, I'm going to step away. I'm going to grab my high-vis jacket because according to our lovely friend Lance, who people are asking who's Lance, he's in the Facebook chat comments. I haven't banned him yet. I'll get around to that soon, but I'm enjoying the fact that he's boosting all of the metrics. So he's just putting in comment after comment after comment, and Facebook loves that. So there's more people watching this video now than there would have been if it weren't for him coming in here and helping me out. But I'm going to grab my high-vis jacket. Just give me 2 secs.
Go for it. I'm going to read all your comments, guys, so feel free to chuck them in. I appreciate all the troll comments too. Feel free to
it's wonderful. We need trolls. We need trolls, honestly. And I enjoy feeding them from time to time because they help my metrics massively. Now, this is the jacket that I was wearing on the, what was it on? Was it just yesterday? Goodness, time's gone weird.
Yeah.
Now, this is my jacket. You will see if I can hold it up without knocking everything over. You will see there the word Topher, faded. This is a 10-year-old jacket that I wore when I was a forklift driver. I spent 7 years working in warehousing and logistics. This is my jacket. And I wore it because you may have noticed I have a slightly recognizable face and I have a little bit of profile. And when I go to places where police are shooting people, I try to be as unrecognizable as possible. And given that at the protests at the moment, there are a lot of people wearing high-vis, I thought that wearing a high-vis jacket would help me to be less noticed by the cops. And to be honest, it worked. Here I am, unarrested, having gone to another protest. So that's that, all right? So John says, don't ban Lance. We need to know who to avoid. Yep. So look, that's all of that. I have promised everyone that I will give them a toilet break every single time I do a slow chat, because otherwise, look, I'm fine too. But I had a near revolt on my hands after some of my early slow chats where people were like, I'm not watching on my phone, I'm watching on my computer. I don't want to take the computer into the toilet with me. So I promised everyone there would be toilet breaks. So what I'm going to do is I thought it would be appropriate, because there's a lot of outrage around the fact that the protest yesterday ended up at the shrine. And I say ended up deliberately. That was not the plan. That was no one intended to go to the shrine. We ended up at the shrine because we literally got chased out of the city by anti-terror police with armored vehicles. Just stop and think about that sentence for a second. Protesters in a liberal democratic country got chased out of the city by anti-terror cops using an armored vehicle. And we ended up at the shrine. Now, there was one time last year where a protest was planned at the shrine. I wasn't thrilled about the location, but I'm not one of the organizers, so I went there. And this, I'm going to play for you while we have a toilet break. I'm going to play for you the speech that I gave at the shrine. This was last year, before we understood just how much worse things were going to get, that I gave at the shrine. And I speak in this speech about the reasons why the shrine it's not sacrilege to protest at the shrine. I think you need to tread very, very carefully. I wouldn't choose to go there again. However, here in this speech are the reasons why I don't believe it is sacrilegious at all to do that. So we're going to watch this, have a toilet break, refill your mug of tea. After this, we're going to move on from the story. So now you know Carly's background, what happened, what they tried to do to her. We're going to talk about what happened in the city today or what didn't happen in the city today. We're going to talk about what's going on in Victoria. We're going to talk about all the current affairs stuff that I know a lot of you have been asking about in the comments. We are going to get to that right after this short break.
As the worst violator of human rights that Victoria has ever seen! 2020 will be remembered as our year of shame! A year when our state resembled a tin pot dictatorship! Our parliament is suspended! We are denied our basic freedoms! And Daniel Andrews and his gang believe that they can get away with murder! We are here at the Shrine of Remembrance for a reason! Daniel Andrews is unworthy to lead a state that is built on the sacrifice of our ancestors! He dishonors their legacy each and every day by denying their descendants the freedoms they fought for. No mistake, this is about human rights. Even the Assistant Commissioner, Chief Wiggum, sorry. Acknowledged yesterday that our right to protest is a human right and it exists regardless of what the Chief Health Officer says. But it's a right that we've been denied for months. We've been subject to arrest, violence, intimidation, harassment and bullying at the hands of the Victorian government and their enforcers for exercising what even they now admit is our human right. But Daniel Andrews is taking all our rights. We have the right to free assembly, to free movement, to freedom of religious expression, and we have the right to our own private property, including our jobs and our businesses. All of those rights have been trampled, and that makes Daniel Andrews the worst violator of human rights that this state has ever seen. Daniel Andrews is unfit for office. He is surrounded by the stench of corruption. He's stonewalling the inquiries that seek to find the truth, and he's been caught out lying time and time again, and he's running from the consequences of his own actions. Daniel Andrews must go. Association with broad terms of reference must be established and charges must be laid. We need to open up the state while the weather is warm, while their hospitals have capacity, while we can protect the sick.
No more fear! 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 No more fear!
Andrews is too proud, too incompetent, and too far out of his depth. He's still treating this like it's March, like we've learned nothing new since March. We can protect the lives of the vulnerable and the elderly without destroying the lives of the young. But first, Daniel Andrews must go! Down with Dan! Down with Dan!
Down with Dan! Down with Dan! Down with Dan!
See, here's the thing. While some people like Lance want to play games and build audiences off the back of other people's suffering, some of us are actually working hard to try and put an end to the suffering and paying quite a high personal price for what we're choosing to do and how we're choosing to spend our time. So we just spent the first half of the slow chat, or the first segment there before the break, hearing about Carly's story and hearing about how she kind of went from a photographer, an ordinary person, anyone like you would be, and all of a sudden was thrust into the limelight in the most horrible possible way. However, there is a lot more to Carly than just her story of what happened. And she's someone now who is paying a lot of attention to what's going on in the world and has a lot to say about what's going on in the world. So we're going to get to some current affairs stuff. And I know a lot of you are very, very keen to understand what actually happened in the city today, what did happen, what didn't happen. There's a lot of videos going around. And I want to address this as well. Someone asked earlier in the comments, this photograph that's been shown, supposedly showing the woman who got pushed over by the police on Saturday was actually a man wearing a wig. There's a lot of nonsense going around right now, including a lot of nonsense about today. There's a lot of videos from previous protests that are being passed off as having been from today's protests. So we need to make sure that we don't sort of get sucked into a lot of that misinformation, and we actually make sure that we are getting our facts from the right places. So I'm going to bring Carly back on. Alrighty.
Hi.
So what the hell is going on in Victoria right now? If we step back from the micro and just look at the macro here, we're looking at a situation, in your opinion, am I taking it too far when I talk about human rights abuses in Victoria?
No, I don't think you are, because I think what you're seeing, and the perfect example is the frog in a pot, I think for the most part, Australians have had such an incredibly prosperous time, like for the last 50, 60 years, that very few Australians know true hardship, true oppression. And for the most part, we have a huge amount of faith in our government and in our democracy. So as time has progressed, things have really taken a turn for the worse, but it's been done in very small increments to the point where it would almost be unnoticeable. Except that there's people like yourself and people like me who, and a lot of our migrant families who are like, nope, this is alarming, this is scary. And so what you have now is this really horrible juxtaposition of people who get this really sense of foreboding, like things aren't great. We know things aren't great for a magnitude of reasons, but also there's this really alarming rhetoric that can seem a little bit hyperbolic, because we're comparing our Australia, our incredibly prosperous first world country, to things that have had historically really terrible moments in time. And I think what you're seeing right now is this horrible cognitive dissonance where people are trying to, even though they can see the proof in front of them, they're doing everything they can to sort of not come to terms with it, and I think that's where a lot of this angst and tension's coming from.
I think there's a normalcy bias. There's this assumption that it'll all go back to normal, that we'll go back to 2019 levels at some point in time. And as much as that'd be nice to believe, unfortunately, there is no guarantee. History shows us very clearly time is not cyclic. We don't return back to some default level. time is linear. Things change. And if we don't actually speak up and try and get back, I was about to say get back our freedoms, some is not good enough, then there's no guarantee we'll get them back. We look at other countries around the world where they've seen their governments doing similar things to what's happened here. You can look at Cuba, you can look at Venezuela, you can look at Zimbabwe, you can look at South Africa right now, you can look at countries all over the world without having to go to the Nazi analogy, without having to go to the communist specter of Reds under the bed. Country after country has given up too much power to its government, and it has taken decades and then usually bloodshed at the end after decades of suffering to actually ever get that back. And we're not immune. This is something that I think you've traveled enough, and well, you've traveled more than me, so not just enough, you've traveled plenty to understand what I mean when I talk about this sort of the Anglosphere, in my view, has this culture. I would liken us to being, you watch an American movie, like a teenage movie, and they've got a bunch of college kids, and there's always that one college kid who's the trust fund baby, who's really arrogant and stuck up, and daddy's rich and my future is assured. They've always got that one character. And I feel like that is basically the entire of Western culture right now in a character. Mm. And it's hard to imagine then if that's us and we're that arrogant, and I think we are, and we're that complacent about our freedoms, what does it take for us to then actually get to the point where we're willing to stand up for our freedoms? What's it going to take to shock people out of that complacency?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and there's something that I've been incredibly vocal about, is the disparity between the suffering. I mean, you've got the laptop class who are relatively untouched, and then you've got the small business community that's been absolutely decimated. So that's the problem. The suffering is unique across the board, and every single one of us is at different stages of this realization and this suffering. For some people, it might be, you haven't had an income for 18 months. For others, it might be watching a business that you've had that was incredibly prosperous folding. For others, it could be you've had to homeschool whilst trying to run your job, and you're a single mum and you're the major breadwinner, and all of a sudden you've got your children at home. The suffering is different, but for some people, some of this suffering is more tolerable. So the laptop class, which everyone keeps referring to, these people are relatively unscathed financially. They most likely have been receiving a full paycheck and just having to operate from home. So there's a level of comfort there. It's different, but it's not uncomfortable, and it's certainly not impinging on the things that we value. And obviously financial stability is a big one of those. What we are seeing now is the laptop class is suffering from mental fatigue and emotional fatigue. Yeah. And so that's where I think we're starting to see this real issue with lack of understanding, because the suffering on either side is different. For some, it's economical. And for a lot of people, it's, having lost everything and everything that you've worked for been taken from you, and those rights to open your business, those rights to do your job have been stripped from you for no other reason. Yet across the road, your neighbor is allowed to work. They're allowed to do their job. And being told that you're not essential, but others are essential, this language. And so
Sorry, no, you go. You finish your point.
No, I was going to say, so what we're seeing is, it's escalating because the laptop class, or those who are relatively untouched, want this over so that they can stop being exhausted and stop being tired. Whereas the other people, the people like myself, the small business community, we want this over so we can build our lives, because we've got nowhere else to go. Yeah. So it's creating this horrible juxtaposition.
There is this division. We're being divided in multiple different ways. Obviously, we're being divided vaxxed versus unvaxxed, and we're being told to hate each other. And the vaccinated people are being told to hate the unvaccinated because apparently we're the ones spreading the disease, even though the data actually indicates that the spread is similar even after you've been vaxxed. We're being divided against your laptop class, your government employee class as well, because they've been relatively untouched. If you're employed by the government, in fact, police have been getting lots of overtime, and there are some that are quite happy about that. And then you've got those that were crushed, and then you've got people like the tradies. There's a lot of comments coming in about the tradies, who they were one of the carve-outs. They were one of the industries that was allowed to keep working, and then they only actually finally fired up literally on Monday when the mandatory vaccine issue suddenly was in their faces, and they got angry about that. Now, it's difficult for me to kind of swallow my frustration. And I had a moment yesterday at the shrine where I asked for the megaphone to encourage people to go home. We'd made our point. I felt like we had done everything that could possibly be achieved in one day. And I wanted to encourage people to go home and not have a confrontation with the police. Unfortunately, a lot of people there ignored me and others who made the same call and chose to stay there until the police literally shot at them and chased them off the shrine. And I think it's a disgraceful thing all around, but we could have de-escalated that and left once we'd actually achieved everything that we were ever going to achieve in that one day. But the tradies now are suddenly getting on board, and I had to swallow my anger because I had the megaphone and I was just saying, look, guys, let's call it a day. And one of the tradie blokes basically yelled out and said, who the fuck's this? And the only reason I didn't let fly and basically say, where the fuck have you been? Like, don't you give me cheek. I've been fighting for your freedom for 18 months while you were fucking happy to sit there and work and go along with it because it hadn't hurt you. And now all of a sudden you want to ask who the fuck am I now that you finally showed up as of Monday, right? Great. Sit down, take a lesson from someone who's been here for a year and a half. But thankfully, someone who was next to me, who had the megaphone previously, basically told him to show some respect and sit down and shut up. And he chose to take that particular piece of advice. So I didn't let fly. But I have to swallow my frustration and go, you know what? When more people join us, we have to welcome them. We have to, we can't afford to be picky.
Absolutely. And that's something I've been trying to communicate to my audience as well. And I understand that. And I always sort of approach things from that devil's advocate point of view, only more so because it helps me manage my own frustrations and my own emotions. Yeah. And I can be quite hot-headed at times, and I've been often described as fiery. So I'm always trying to sort of self-regulate from that point of view. And so I felt the same, Topher. I felt the same. I was like, I have literally been screaming about this for over 15 months. I have made point after point after point and constantly been campaigning. And for the most part, it fell on deaf ears. And I got thrown into that conspiracy camp, even though not once have I ever touched on any of the conspiracies. I just wrote very plainly and very simply about the breakdown of politics. Yeah. And to find people all of a sudden realizing that, oh, actually, this isn't good, or, oh, that's not great. It's like, like you've been trying to shake them. But what I realize is what we need is more people on our side. So ostracizing and splitting off into factions is actually the worst thing for our cause. So we need to welcome them.
100%. 100%. Neil has said something very kind here. He says, like when I was fighting for water, absolutely. And I hope to get back to that. It's just you cannot get any oxygen for any other issue. The Murray-Darling Basin, that's been my main issue for the last 12 years. No, I can't claim that. Not for the last 12 years, for about the last 9 years. It took me a little while for me to cotton on to what was going on there. So, we have to. We can't be picky if we're going to actually make change. And this same principle, unfortunately, this same principle has to apply. I read at the very, very start, I read a leaked snippet, a small portion of a statement that is going to be coming out soon, I believe, from a police officer talking about their own heartbreak, seeing they were standing in front of the protesters and their heartbreak at actually looking at us and saying they're right. But they chose to stand on the line and continue to stand on the line, but they're very close to cracking, and a lot of police officers are. And we have to have the good grace. We have to be the adults in the room to say, okay, you've been wrong this whole time, but now that you're willing to say that you were wrong, we're going to put all of that behind us and we're going to move forward together. Like we absolutely have to do that. If we try and carry this division forward, these wounds are just not going to get healed. And we can't afford that.
Absolutely. And a big thing of this too, and I think this is also how I was able to sort of bounce back, for lack of better words, as quick as I did, is that it's very easy to get caught up in anger. It's one of the first emotions we feel, and it can be overwhelming, and that anger can sort of really cloud our perception of what's going on. But if we, I feel like I'm being a bit woo-woo when I say this, but I don't say this for any other reason than the only way to de-escalate this, the only way to get people back on board is to meet people with compassion. And you've got to be that bigger person. And, if you're someone, and this is the thing, right? Like people make that joke about being red-pilled or blue-pilled or whatever. Sure. If you're someone that's just been red-pilled, can you imagine having to unlearn and try and break down everything that you've swallowed so blindly for the last 18 months. Like,
Yeah.
if you can meet those people with a level of compassion, and, you know, I look at the laptop class like this, and to a degree the tradies, because people only care about things when it does impact them. And we can't get mad at people for that.
Yes. Yeah.
That's human nature. So if these people are starting to get real red-pilled, I just like that terminology. I think it's great. There's going to be this genuine confusion and this absolute sort of wild sort of adjustment period where you're like, well, what's true? Where do I look? And how can I be wrong? And it's very difficult when you're in that kind of mindset to then go eat some humble pie and be like, hey, guys, I was wrong. I'm on your side. Let's do this. You know, there's going to be an adjustment. And I think that's where we're seeing. And that's why with these protests, these tradies are fed up because, you know, they're fighting for their reasons, which we know is not just about the tea rooms. It's the mandates and
I defy anyone to go through Rukshan's footage from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday where he got hour upon hour of footage. Find me a single chant that was about the tea rooms. Find me one. There were generic union slogan chants, and there were anti-mandatory vaccination. And it's important to say mandatory. They're not anti-vax, they're anti-mandatory vaccination. There was nothing about the tea rooms.
And just on that, and, you know, something I'd like to clarify is my stance on this as well. I'm not anti anything, and I'm really disturbed by the corruption of language during this time. I'm not anti, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, none of that. What I'm against with these mandates is precedent. Because if you can mandate a medical procedure today, what can you do tomorrow? And, you know, you and I have talked about the slippery slope argument prior to this, but by setting precedent, by opening that door, you are now allowing something else to come from behind. You're opening the door up to other legislation, other mandates that may down the line be even more detrimental. Like, it starts with the vax
100%.
and then it's a booster. And then what is it, you know? And so that's what I'm against. I'm against the precedent of legislation telling me what I should and shouldn't be doing to my body.
And this is a concept that so many people who get really they treat politics like it's sport. Like there's my team and there's your team, which is nonsense. But they have this idea that I want my team to have this extra power. But they don't realize that means that after the next election, that power is still going to be in the hands of whoever wins and whoever wins and whoever wins. They're not giving Daniel Andrews, you know, Daddy Dan, the power to look after them and keep them safe. They're giving every single premier that we ever have for the entire future of this state that power. And I have a lot of fun with this because I say, oh, well, would you give that power to Tony Abbott? Would you give that power to someone like a Peter Dutton if they were elected as premier or as a prime minister? Oh, no, fuck him, blah, blah. Would you have given that power to Johnny Howard? No, he was okay. Then can we agree that politicians shouldn't have this power? Because once you give it to politicians, you give it to all the politicians going forward, not just the ones that we have right now.
And it's well known. I mean, you know, and I don't ever say these things to speak out of turn against Aussies. Like, I am obviously an Australian, but I'm very lucky to have not only lived overseas, but travel extensively. And I think what the average Aussie lacks is perspective to how we rate against the rest of the world. There is so much red tape and bureaucracy and administration that complicate all of our basic things. Australia progressively has made things harder and harder, whether it's the construction industry, the health industry, medicals. The way we are moving to, and, you know, people make the joke about nanny state. That's where we're at the moment. We have outsourced all of our personal autonomy, all of our critical thought to a handful of people. And for the most part, most of them aren't elected. Our government bureaucrats aren't elected. Our leaders might be, but who they choose to employ is up to them. And so what we're seeing is, like, choices are being made not just for us, but future generations based on our lack of ability to voice our disdain with what they're doing. So, you know, anyone that's getting upset at the moment, we're doing this for the next generation, for our children. I mean, I don't have kids, you do, but this is what happens. This is how we get to the point where we can't do anything anymore without the government giving us permission. This is how you get to a social credit system. It's just an escalation. And to be honest, my issue with the mandates and the passport is that is a very, and I keep saying the word slippery slope, but forgive me, I haven't got a better argument, but vaccine passports is a hop, skip, and a jump from a social credit system.
And people get grumpy. I want to touch on this. People get grumpy about the slippery slope argument. Oh, you think we're at the top of a slippery slope? No, I don't think we're at the top of a slippery slope. I think we've been sliding down it for about 40 years. Right? You know, the thin edge of the wedge. No, we're not at the thin edge of the wedge. The thin edge of the wedge happened a very, very long time ago. That wedge is getting pretty damn thick now. And if someone can't see that, I'm almost at the point where I'm like, you know what, if you can't see it, I'm not that interested in discussing it with you, because it's one of those things that you either see, you get, or you just don't. And I'm not going to, I spoke yesterday and a lot of people appreciated this. So I'll take the liberty of saying it again tonight, because I know other people will be watching. This issue of triage. Right? There are, let's talk in a medical context. If there's a natural disaster, there's a huge number of people being injured and being brought into the emergency room. There is a nurse that has the unenviable job of being the triage nurse on site. And they basically put people into three categories. There are people who don't need treatment for a life-threatening injury. All right? They can wait. They'll get treatment later when there's capacity. There are people for whom the damage is too great. They've been injured too much, and no amount of treatment is going to save them. And regrettably, you have to just not waste resources on those people. And then there's the people in the middle that if you put resources into them, they can be saved. You can actually make a difference by putting resources into those people. And that, of course, is where the hospital in that situation will put their resources, into the people where it can make a difference. And we as human beings need to be the same. When it comes to our political campaigns, when it comes to our relationships, our friendships, people have been asking, what do you do when there's someone who's just on the other side and they won't listen? Well, there comes a point where, I'm not saying cut them out of your life. I'm not saying burn a bridge or anything like that, but stop putting resources in to trying to turn them around. Put the resources, we all have limited resources, limited emotional reserves, limited psychological reserves. Put your resources in to the place where it's actually going to yield the biggest result for you. And that's going to lead to the greatest happiness and the greatest change in your life. When we talk about this social credit system, the introduction of this sort of stuff, when we talk about this slippery slope, we are still at the point where we can potentially turn this around, but there may come a day when we can't. So in my opinion, we need to pour resources into fighting this now while there is still a chance, before the day comes when it's actually the patient is too far gone.
Yeah. And I think the other thing aside from that is the alarming thing, and we saw it transpire yesterday, but the lack of the instant dismissal of any opposition. So to have a functioning democracy, you need to have two sides, not necessarily a two-party system, but, an equal and opposite reaction. And what we're seeing is not only the suppression of the opposition, but the censorship and dismissal. Like, for Daniel Andrews and CFMEU to talk about these protesters as if they're Nazis, it's not only to disagree, it's to completely debase them and rob them of any credibility and humanity.
Correct.
And that is alarming.
That's that pigeonhole thing that I talked about earlier. We're trained to want to slide people into a pigeonhole and then close the pigeonhole and lock them in. And we don't allow people to be more nuanced than that. We don't give people the time to actually listen to them and say, oh, I see, you've got certain views that fit in this category, but actually you've got other views that fit in that category over there. And it's one of the I think most dangerous tendencies that we have is this putting people into pigeonholes. We're locking people in place and we're closing our minds to the possibility that actually they may be much more sophisticated and much more nuanced as human beings than what we're actually giving them credit for.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's sort of been implied now and actively encouraged by our government, and this is my particular contention with Daniel Andrews, is community policing. To see neighbors and friends and families dobbing in each other in for microaggressions, like, this person had a person at their house. We don't know the circumstance. And I always talk about the importance of context, but because we've reached this point of community policing, context is irrelevant now. It's like, no, it's black and white. And we know just from life itself, life is not black and white. There are so many variables. And a lack of context from one person's perspective will completely shift what's happening. Do you know what I mean? So to have our language corrupted and escalated to these really hyperbolic terms like, Nazis and extremists and far right and left wing and right wing. And what we're doing now is pushing people further and further across to the fringe. And I don't want to say the word radicalized, but people are getting escalated. And to see a democracy functioning well and progressing would require us to be relatively moderate, and so that we can have a really progressive discussion and move forward. And true progress comes from nuanced discussion with a really wide perspective. You can't have progress if you suppress and censor the other side.
Correct. Correct. Now, Graham has actually made a great comment here. I'll just jump to now. Paul Keating said it all when he told the left to play the man, not the ball. I've got to say, Paul Keating's tenure as Prime Minister is aging very, very well. And he's someone that I didn't particularly appreciate when I was younger. I've come out of this really hyper-partisan political upbringing where we were liberal. I was raised in a Liberal Party family. And I would have to say Paul Keating's legacy is aging very, very well. And a lot of what he said and a lot of what he warned about is aging very, very well. And I did not give him enough credit when I was a kid, that's for sure. So I did promise that we were going to talk a little bit about what's happening in the more immediate. And as much as I thoroughly enjoy these chats with you about the more in principle stuff, let's talk a little bit more immediate. I want to deal with this ridiculous photo that's been going around supposedly showing that the woman who got shoved over on Saturday was actually a man and the wig is on the road. No, that is a photoshopped photograph. The full video that is available online, you can see it. She gets shoved over. She gets pepper sprayed. She lies there for a little while. Her hair does not come off her head. Let's be clear about that. And then the police officers who committed that assault, and it is an assault, it was a violent, unprovoked assault, moved on. And other police officers came behind, and there is one particular angle where the person continued to film her for a little bit longer, and you can see her sitting up and beginning to get medical attention from the police that came to attend to her. At no point was there a wig. It didn't go flying off her head. She was not lying there on the road with a wig next to her head. That never happened. Now, what I suspect is that someone is either trolling because they just think it's funny, or that this is an attempt at some pretty serious misinformation, where they are basically trying to take all the moments where the police are going way too far and they can't defend it. They can't defend the police's actions. So they are cynically fabricating a lie in order to try and protect the police. And this is a worry, Carly, when you've got this sort of activity going on and people don't know what to believe. People often end up believing the worst. Often this stuff backfires.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the interesting thing about this, and this is what I say in regards to whether it's cancel culture or this really sort of far left narrative that we're establishing, is it becomes a cancer and it eats itself from the inside out. So you've bred this toxic culture where it's community policing and everyone's distrusting and turning on each other. So now everyone's hyper vigilant. Everyone's got their phones out. They're just waiting to catch that microaggression that someone makes. But what they're actually catching is the stuff that they don't want us to see. So, I mean, perfect example is the footage of that terrible incident where a man was like body slammed into the concrete, completely unprovoked. And like traditionally, we wouldn't see that. And the media wasn't there. The media is deliberately never there when these things happen. But because people are hypervigilant, because they've been told to by our governments, well, our government's now getting caught out, and it's becoming very, very increasingly terrifying to see these events that probably, for the most part, happened behind closed doors and we never saw them. And look, I'm the first person to say I've got friends who are police officers, and I believe they're great. But like with everything, there's a couple of bad eggs and the bad apples. But what we're seeing now is that it's in full view. I mean, that footage from the protest on Saturday, that poor woman, you watch, I mean, we've all fallen over. You saw my skateboard photo and you can see what that small impact can do. Yeah. That was her head. Her head was the first point of contact. So that was a potentially
fatal assault. That was a potentially fatal assault. There's no doubt about that. I want to bring up Matthew. Oops, sorry. It just moved on me right when I went to do that. There we go. I want to bring up Matthew Farrell's comment. What does it matter if she's a 70-year-old woman or a 30-year-old man? It was wrong. This, I think, cuts to the heart of it. And I meant to say this and then forgot and moved on. This idea that, we can defend the police's actions because it wasn't a 70-year-old woman, it was a 34-year-old man. Oh, well, that's okay then. You can just walk up and brutally assault a 34-year-old man. That's no problem. Like, what's the mindset here? You mentioned the person who got grabbed from behind by the police, and I mean, I posted this video on my TOFA page on Facebook. It's a few posts down now, but you'll see it there. And the way that the police officer comes in behind, grabs this individual, lifts them into the air. Now, even in AFL, or in rugby, if you tackle somebody and you take their feet off the ground and slam them into the ground, you will get banned for a few weeks. If I did that outside a pub in King's Cross in Sydney, that would be classified as an assault, and rightly so. But he lifts this person up and their arms are pinned. to their side because they weren't animated. They weren't, their arms were down and they were chatting with the cops. They got grabbed, their arms were pinned. They had absolutely no ability to protect their own head and got slammed into the ground. Someone asked earlier, do I know what that individual's condition is? And the honest answer is no, I'm sorry, I don't. I've had no updates. I don't know who that was. There's also the issue of the individual who was shot in the face with a rubber bullet. And we've seen the images covered in blood. Very, very distressed and very distressing images. I haven't posted them to my Facebook page because it is quite distressing. And we know that person's name because the police officer in that video asked them their name and they state their name. I don't know what condition that individual is in either. And these are the kinds of things that are going on. Now, I don't think that this is representative of the average police officer, but the problem is that at the moment, this stuff is being swept under the carpet. And to our knowledge, we're not seeing this being addressed. I will say, actually, I'll correct myself. I just posted before this started, Channel 7 have picked up on the story of that individual who was picked up and slammed into the ground. And apparently an investigation has been launched. But Shane Patton, the police commissioner, has come out and said, we don't know the full circumstances. We don't know all of what was going on. Well, okay, that's true. Context is important. I will grant that. But what we do see is there wasn't a mob situation. There was an isolated individual talking in a calm manner to a large number of police, and another police officer simply walks up behind them and launches what appears to be an unprovoked assault. Yeah. That much we can see. So I understand his position, and he can't make a judgment on it until an inquiry has happened. That is the nature of his position. But we had better see some police officers starting to be held accountable for some of this stuff pretty soon. Or my concern is that people are going to start to conclude that it's open hunting season.
And that's the thing. I keep talking about precedent, and that's the alarming thing from that video. It's that's the one we caught. What happened to the ones we didn't catch? You know what I mean? And the fact that it happened in such open view in Flinders Street Station, I'm guessing it's right where all the ticketing booths and the escalators are.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, that's where it looks like it is. And it's like, it's very clear, like, yes, context is important, but also you can see the footage. The man clearly is unprovoked. He goes back to the police officer, and as you say, he gets picked up and thrown to the ground. I understand he might have been under arrest, but for what, it doesn't matter. Did he need to be arrested like that? Could you not have grabbed his arms and put them? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not a police officer, but that seems to me like that is an excessive use of force for a situation that didn't demand it. And that's what we're seeing now. Like, it's no longer just prior to COVID. If there were to be a protest, the police would sit on the sidelines and just make sure there wasn't any dickheads. Now we're rolling out the Bearcat and anti-terrorism squads on Australian citizens who have no arms. Like, we're defenseless, and you've got the anti-terror police out. What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah, and this is my concern. There is a political truism that has always been true, and this expression has existed in one form or another for thousands of years, and it is this: if you make peaceful change impossible, you make violent change inevitable. And this is my concern with Daniel Andrews using the police as though it's his own private army, shutting down his political opponents with ever more increasingly aggressive tactics. My concern is that we're heading towards a situation where someone, and it won't be me, but someone is going to look at it and say, there is no peaceful option left. They've taken away all my peaceful options. Voting doesn't work because the parliament's been shut down. The courts are too expensive and inaccessible, and I can't make something happen in the courts. The media are against us. I can't even exercise my right to protest. My human rights have been taken off me. All of my peaceful options have been taken away. And my concern is that we're heading towards a situation where some individual is going to go, well, if all my peaceful options are gone, then I'm going to do the other thing. And that has the potential to be a very dark day for Victoria and something that we may never come back from.
And that's what I'm seeing, and you touched on that before in regards to the protest, because you have a mixed bag now. You've got people who have been campaigning this whole time. Now you've got people new to the cause who are full of gumption and testosterone, and a lot of them are drinking as well, which I find alarming, but that's
that, to be clear, that I did not see that at any of the protests prior to the tradies joining in. I want to be clear about that. The freedom campaigners that have been working away on this issue for a year and a half, that was not present at their protests, and it's something that we need to weed out from among the newcomers.
And what that shows me is, and this, again, I'm not trying to speak out of turn or chastise anyone, but it just shows you there's a level of they're juvenile in their approach to this, because for them, they're like, oh, we haven't worked for a week. Like, this is a bit of a piss up.
That's
and,
right. That's right.
You know, we've seen that footage of the two blokes who snuck into someone's backyard and were snorting coke. And it's like, of course, that's what the media grabs. But what the media doesn't talk about is the people who are mums and dads and small business owners who are just like, finally, there's a movement. Like, we can be together and unified in this. And again, you get those examples of idiots. But what that does, and what I wish I could say to those people, and it's not to chastise you, it's just to say you're actually jeopardizing this. Like, there's a chance we will be heard. There is a chance we'll be met with compassion, but you need to put your best foot forward. It's not about sitting there ranting and raving and thinking that the more hysterical and stupid you are, the police are going to give in to you. And I think you had left by this stage, Topher, but I had Rukshan's live feed. I've been watching it the whole time. And at the end, there was some kind of negotiations between one of the protesters and the police front. And the police were like, we're giving you safe passage through St. Kilda Road. You can all leave through there. Like, that's, you know, and people are like, no, they're going to arrest you. And it's like, well, no, you can't go through the centre because, like, all the vehicles are there. Yeah. And that made sense. And that's when the protesters should have gone, all right.
Yeah. So I was there during the negotiations, and I was one of the people that got a megaphone and said, hey, guys, let's go. Yeah, but I think this is the exuberance of some of the newcomers. They think that this is going to be a quick thing. They think they're going to show up to a few protests and then they're going to win.
Yeah.
And those of us that have been doing this literally since 2 financial years ago, we understand that this is a long game. And any protest under these current circumstances where Danielle Andrews got on the radio and got on the TV yesterday morning before that protest happened and said, we're rolling out new tactics. They rolled out the anti-terror squad and they rolled out the Bearcat. Now, if we can still get a critical mass of people together under those circumstances and end up in a stalemate with the police, we have won. Because at that point, the Premier has put himself out there. These are the next level tactics. Oh, shit, that didn't work. We'd won. We'd won the day. We could literally, and the police were in a stalemate such that they were going to literally, and they literally, actually, not just metaphorically, they literally moved back 10 meters from where, because we were very close to each other, the lines were very close to each other. It was not tense for most of the time. I say that, you've got a whole bunch of armed people standing there looking at you with weapons that they're willing to use, but it wasn't actually a tense situation for the vast majority of the day. And they then moved backwards 10 meters as a gesture of goodwill. And you have to understand the position that the police commanders are in and realize that they can't do any more than that. That's it. You've reached the limit of what they can do and keep their jobs, right?
And that's the thing. There does have to be movement from both sides. This is not about one side getting everything and the other one getting nothing. This is about finding some kind of moderate, safe ground between the two of us so that we can go forward. It's like, people want the, no vax at all. And it's like, well, no, that's not what I want. I want people to have the freedom to do it if they feel safe. That's fantastic. If you are, fantastic. That's great. But don't mandate it. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm trying to say. We don't want an all or nothing approach to any of this. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of these new protesters. They're thinking that this is some kind of like Braveheart movie where you sit there and you defeat your enemy and they bow over and it's all over. It's not real life. That's not real life,
this is not a Hollywood movie. I want to bring up this because this is a great question. So Lynn says, I actually think it was good that they stood their ground. Why trust the police? They've not earned anyone's trust. Why couldn't the police have moved the vehicles? They wanted to save face. That's a great point. And I agree, I agree that the police haven't earned anyone's trust. In fact, some people that did try and leave via St Kilda Road did then get arrested. I think that was a communication issue within the police. But you're absolutely right. They haven't earned any trust. But if you take away this view of we're going to win tonight, like people could have stuck it out all night and could have battled away with the police all night. Come sunrise, is Danielle Andrews going to have stepped down? No. Is anything in reality going to have changed? No. We had achieved everything that could be achieved in one day. And this, I think, is my main point. We had achieved everything that could be achieved in a single day, and we had the opportunity to leave with minimal collateral damage. People who hadn't been shot. I mean, I know Matt Lawson now. I've met him through this whole protest thing. He's the one that got shot. He was the very first person to get shot with a rubber bullet. He's still not 100%. Like he's still recovering from that. And when you invite the police to now have to have a confrontation where they're shooting repeatedly at a whole bunch of people, well, guess what? Anyone that gets hit, yeah, if they get hit properly at close range, they're not coming back the next day, or they're not coming back the next week, or even in a month, right? Because it takes a very long time to recover from that. We had the chance to have a win and come back and fight, the next day and the day after, etc. And I would have loved for everyone to have seen it that way. That's not how life works. Other people saw it the same way that you do, Lynn. So fair enough. But unfortunately, in my opinion, that's what led to some very ugly scenes and some things that I would have hoped would never happen at the Shrine of Remembrance. That's not a place that you want to see that sort of thing happening. I mean, you don't want to see it happening anyway, but that's certainly not a place that you want to see that happening.
And see, this is the thing, the actual point that we should be focusing on gets corrupted by all these little micro things around it. So, now instead of the fact that there was a peaceful protest at the Shrine of Remembrance, we're focusing on the urination. And no one's showed footage of that. Not that I want to see that, but it's like, oh, people urinated all over the shrine. I'm like, all over the shrine? Like everyone did it? Or one person did it? But what it means is it just tarnishes the movement. And what they didn't show, and I saw it on Rushkin's, do I say his name right? Is it Rushkin?
Rukshin. The K is before the H.
Yeah. He was showing on his feed that the protests were being so respectful. They were cleaning up all the rubbish. And at one point, a gentleman came out. He had all his medals on his chest. And he just said, hey, guys, no dramas. Just be nice to the shrine. Just respect it. And I was like, good, well done. And then he got arrested by the cops. And it's like,
that was ridiculous. Like I really felt for him. As a combat veteran, that shrine obviously speaks directly to him and his experiences. I don't know what he went through, or he may have lost mates. Who knows? And this is why we did go to the shrine last year. I'll put my hand up and say, yep. When the organizers said we're going to the shrine, I showed up to the shrine. And was that the right thing to do? For the reasons that you saw in the speech that I gave at the halfway point of this video, I'm of the opinion that it wasn't the wrong thing to do given what we're protesting about. However, it wasn't ideal, and I would have happily never gone back there and never brought the protests back there. We only ended up there because the anti-terror squad and the Bearcat were literally chasing us around the city. And we ended up there as a last resort because we hoped that it would cause the cops to have to stand down a little bit and be less aggressive with us. And I can guarantee you that from that perspective, it worked. If we'd gathered in, let's say, Federation Square, would they have had a standoff with us? Or would they have just come in and started shooting? We know they would have come in and started shooting because that's what they were already doing everywhere else in the city. So I don't begrudge the people that made the decision that that's where they wanted to go, and it had the desired effect. However, you then have a genuine combat veteran coming out and saying, hey, guys, I'm not okay with this. And I really felt for him. And it's just one of those situations where there is no good outcome. I understand why the people went there. I joined them there. I can also understand where he's coming from. And when, for example, people said, look, can you get off there's these large plinths that come out from the upper staircase, and people said, look, can you just get off those, please? And they did. And then other people who didn't hear that, because people can't hear everything, the megaphone literally only gets maybe 5% of the crowd, right? People come in from the back and go, oh, there's a spare spot over there, and they fill it up again, and then we have to clear it again. But that was happening. People were trying and actively trying to be respectful to the shrine, obviously with some exceptions. And it didn't have to end up with these images of police shooting at people and pushing them off. I really that had not been the outcome.
And I think that's, for those of you who are watching this and those who watch after tonight, my approach to this is give a little to gain a lot. Don't expect that you're gonna get 100% compliance to your wishes. That's not the objective here. I respect and appreciate that on the opposition to me, there are some very valid arguments, and I'm not trying to denounce those arguments by any respect. But what I would like to see is my objectives listened to, and being dismissed as a Nazi, I think is absolutely deplorable. But, in regards to the shrine itself, I'm a big believer in symbology, and the shrine's there to remind us of the servicemen and women who gave their life for our country, and nothing is taking from that. I think that is as a matter of fact, as time goes on, I feel like the value of the shrine, the importance of Anzac Day sort of falls on deaf ears, particularly with the younger generation. So if we can find new reasons to celebrate the shrine and to realize the importance of it, I think that's a very positive thing. But obviously that was taken away. And, you know, the footage of Ructions yesterday was people were sitting down and taking a knee in front of the shrine. Like they were actively trying to show we're here in a respectful manner. We're trying to do the right things. And then naturally the day went on. People are tired. People have been there all day.
The sun was hot. People were getting dehydrated.
You know, and then you see all this silliness come out. And it's, you know, as you said, like, come back tomorrow. We'll resume negotiations tomorrow.
All right. So let's talk about the coming back tomorrow, because tomorrow in this context was today. Now, what we saw today was to me very, very interesting. The government did escalate a step further. They put a ban on live streaming from helicopters from mainstream media. That has been challenged in court and has been overturned, by the way. So that ban is gone. And they also, I'm hearing different reports, and this is part of the challenge. There's no central repository of information. You're just getting snippets and bits and pieces from different people. And there did appear to be an inability for people to live stream from the city. Not everyone. There were a few people that did manage to do some live streaming. But as a result, it was difficult for a group to coalesce. It was difficult for a group to get together. There were a lot of protesters in the city today, but they weren't able to find each other, basically, and actually form a group. There's a dance that goes on. And for those that haven't been to protests, let me sort of explain to you. Those first few hundred people that gather are the people that are taking the biggest risk, because they are incredibly vulnerable. It doesn't take a large number of police resources to kettle them, to bottle them up, to come in and shoot at them and clear them out of the way. Once you've got a few thousand, the police have to respond in larger numbers, and that means that they're slower to respond. And if you just keep marching and keep moving, then there's safety in numbers. And once you reach that, you know, maybe 2,000 mark, they have to start to respect you a little bit more. But those people that actually form, you know, you can't get 2,000 without first having 100. And then 300, and then 500, and then 1,000. And it's those first people that come in to form that critical mass that are taking the biggest risk. And it's very difficult under the current circumstances, where you've literally got anti-terror police and armored vehicles driving down the street, shooting at people. Yes, with less lethal ammunition, you know, not with live ammunition, with less lethal ammunition, but nevertheless. We were told when the Victorian government bought this equipment, we were told that it was to keep us safe from terror attacks. We were assured that it would never get misused. Well, I'm sorry, but driving it down the street to break up a protest of people who are exercising their human right to engage in political protest is not an appropriate use of anti-terror equipment. It never has been. It never will be. So those people...
That was, again, another use of symbolism. Do you know what I mean? Like, Daniel Andrews loves his, like, those moments where he can posture. Do you know what I mean? It's always about the news grab and I call it the thumbnail picture, because that's what it was. It's just grandstanding. It's like, look, we're rolling out this big, awesome piece of weaponry that we have that we haven't had a chance to use, and it makes me look so powerful. Yeah. And it's symbol. It's that to the average punter would have been terrifying. Like, that's not normal in our streets. And it was to send that message.
I'm really concerned about how my own perceptions have changed in the last little while. Actually, let me get back to that. I want to actually touch on this great question here from David Caff. Guys, do you think marching is the best course of action moving forward? I think we have two remaining non-violent options, and they are protest. And yes, they become violent, but we're not the ones being violent. Okay, so when I talk about non-violent, I'm talking about us not being the ones that are initiating violence. Protesting and civil disobedience. And I am super encouraged and super excited to see the amount of civil disobedience that is now beginning to happen. I'm not going to name names, but as I have traveled around today, I've bought coffee, I took my son to the park, we played for a while. I've seen an enormous number. I mean, the park was the busiest I have seen it since all this nonsense started. Less than half of the adults had masks on. Going to the coffee shop, less than half of the adults standing around waiting for a coffee had masks on. Building sites that are still working, you can hear the saws, you can hear the nail guns, as people are just like, I can't do this. I'm not going to shut down. I'm getting on with life. The civil disobedience is, I think, going to be the crux of it. That's what brought down the Russian vaccine passport, was that people just ignored it. People didn't obey it. Or actually, sorry, not quite. Sorry, that's not quite what happened. What happened was people didn't go to restaurants that were actually checking the vaccine passport, including vaccinated people. stopped going to those restaurants. They rebelled. It was like a civil rebellion against that. And everybody was patronizing the venues that weren't checking the passports. And very quickly, all the venues that were checking the passports started lobbying the government to say, hey, we've got to get rid of this because we're going to go broke.
Yeah.
In Denmark, they tore down the COVID pass system there very quickly. In Italy, it still exists, but it exists in name only. It doesn't exist functionally. Civil disobedience is, I think, one of the biggest tools that we have. But I do still think that the marching is important. And it's important for exactly the same reason that you've been talking about, Carly. It's the symbolism.
Yeah.
Right? Imagine if there had been no protests at all. How much more power and how much more authority would Daniel Andrews be perceived to have when he says, oh, people support this. I have the support of the Victorian people. What if there had not been a single protest? How would you argue with that? How would you say that he was wrong? So I think that's really important.
That's exactly the point. And like when you talk about symbolism, that's what the protests are there to demonstrate. That it's the whole numbers thing, right? It's showing that a collective number of people are in a disagreement with this. At the moment, because we're all isolated, because we're all locked at home and we can't socialize for the better part, there's no collective visual representation. Like humans are incredibly visual people. If we can see a huge mass of people disagreeing, what that does is it buoys and confirms in someone else, oh, I'm not alone in my thinking.
Yeah,
and
I'm not crazy.
I'm not crazy. So there is a high chance that should they feel confident enough, they might as well join in. And that's why, like you said before, the protest starts with 70 and then it gets to 100 and then it's 1,000. Because people slowly start to feel a little bit more confident. If you don't have that visual representation of a huge mass gathering, you're not going to be able to collectively grab all the people who are feeling disenfranchised right now. And so that's why people say, oh, protests don't work. It's not necessarily about the protest itself revoking the mandates. It's showing how many people collectively are in a disagreement with what's going on.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
That's how democracy works. It's the majority. And so if there's a huge amount of opposition, it needs to be tabled. It needs to be discussed. That's literally the nature of a democracy. And, it was interesting. Before I was preparing to come on here, I was looking at some bits and pieces, and I never know where our chats are going to go. But, I was looking up what the principles of socialist society is. And then I was like, just for shits and gigs, I'm going to write down the principles of democracy. And the nature of our democracy is built on the right to freedom of assembly and political protest. We are, that is literally a human right. And people keep saying, well, during the chief health officer's health orders, it's illegal. It's like, no. That's the whole point of a democracy. Above all else.
Can I correct the language slightly?
Please go.
A democracy, strictly speaking, is mob rule. The majority get what they want. And if the majority, if 50% of the population plus one person wants to exterminate 49% of the population, then in a pure democracy, they get what they want. That's the law. What we have is not actually a democracy. It's what's known as a liberal democracy. Not liberal as in the Liberal Party, but liberal as in a liberal system, a system of freedom. So what we have is a democracy where the system that we have, the Westminster democracy that we have, is supposed to protect freedoms for individuals. So it's not mob rule. The mob, the majority, get to decide who gets to be the prime minister and who gets to do various different functions. But the government itself is limited in its powers, and there are certain freedoms that are guaranteed to us or are supposed to be guaranteed to us. And that's where the liberal democracy comes in. And to me, as we try and improve language, as we talk about these things, I think it is important to use the expression liberal democracy to distinguish from a pure mob rule type scenario, because that's what some politicians would like us to believe. Well, I have a mandate. I won the election. Therefore, I have a mandate to do whatever the hell it is that I want to do because I got the majority. Well, that's not how it works, because we're not actually a democracy. We're a liberal democracy. And there are limits on the power of government. So sorry,
No, that's good. You taught me something. I appreciate that. And I think that's the thing. That's the whole value of these long form discussions, is that not only are we going back and forth, but those who are watching are sort of taking some things away from this as well. And what it's doing is giving you the ability to then create these conversations outside of this moment. So, if you've just learnt that, then it's like, okay, well, now I understand. And I feel like what's happened the last 18 months, in much to the disillusionment of our government, we've actually highly politicized people. People have become politically active, and for the most part, I think we've chatted about this before, but Australians are mostly apathetic when it comes to political engagement. We vote because we have to, and for the most part, Liberal, Labor, same. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
you're absolutely right.
And now we've got people vestedly in, like, going, well, what goes on? And one of the biggest ones, and sorry to hijack it, but there was a question before, and it's one that has come up a lot the last 12 months, particularly in Victoria, is where's the Prime Minister? Why can't he fire Daniel Andrews? And I'm like, that's a great question. Do you know how we work? Do you understand the Federation and the states? And
that's right.
People
there was a question earlier about the Governor General. Can the Governor General step in? Well, the Governor General is federal. So states have governors. The federal government has a Governor General. The Governor General has the power under certain circumstances to dismiss the federal government. They have no power whatsoever over state governments. Technically, a state governor could dismiss the government, but unfortunately, this is an area where we've and this is why I talk about the fact that we've been going wrong for decades. This is not we didn't go wrong 18 months ago when all the COVID stuff started. We've been going wrong for decades. The idea is that the government is supposed to be acting on behalf of the Queen with a couple of key functions, or on behalf of the Crown with a couple of key functions. Number one of their crucial functions is to assess all legislation to make sure that it actually is constitutional and lawful and acceptable. A piece of legislation requires the governor's signature in order for it to actually have the force of law. And they're supposed to be assessing it, but they don't. They just rubber stamp and just you sign everything that gets put in front of them. Why? Because the Governor General is effectively appointed by the government. It's a buddy mate type situation. Instead of having a representative of the Crown appointed by the Crown, what we have is someone that is a representative of the Premier, who is proposed by the Premier to the Crown, and the Crown just rubber stamps and signs off on. So what was supposed to be a check and balance, where there was a representative of the Crown in place, keeping an eye on everything and making sure the government didn't do what Daniel Andrews is doing. Instead, now we have a situation where it's one of Daniel Andrews' mates who is in that place. And what is it? The patients are running the asylum. All right. He's appointed one of his mates to be his watch person, the person that's supposed to keep him in check. So there's a lot of elements to our system that aren't working. I think the system itself, if we brought it back to its original design, is actually quite a good system. It's obviously not perfect because the system allowed us to get to the point where we are. So obviously something's not right. But it's not a bad system if we could get back to it. But the problem is it's not functioning the way it was designed to function at all.
It's not, and we're seeing that. And when you voice these things, Topher and I are predominantly libertarian, I would say, even though we both had liberal upbringings. The problem we're seeing here is an abuse of powers. Like, there are loopholes that this government can use. The state of emergency is a perfect example of that. It keeps getting extended. The state of emergency is what allows them to operate hotel quarantine, but also allows them to put these mandates in. And at the moment, it just keeps getting extended. And then come December, they are meant to table some kind of legislation to make hotel quarantine a permanent piece of law. But in typical Labor way, they hide things in the bill. And that's what we're seeing. So, and at the moment, the way things are running in Victoria, and I don't want to say this is from complacency, but because we haven't been politically engaged as, I say, citizens of Victoria, for the better part of 20 years, we've had a government that has been in power for almost 2 decades, apart from that small stint with Ted Baillieu.
Apart from 3 years, yeah.
And so what you have is like lifetime politicians, lifetime bureaucrats who have done the same thing for 2 decades. And, look at what's unfolded the last 2 decades. Like, life has changed dramatically. We got the internet, for one, and people have a very short memory of what happens in 20 years' time. So rewind the clock. We've got the internet, we've got social media, all these incredibly momentous times in history. And we've essentially had the same people in power the whole time. Obviously not Daniel Andrews the whole time, but what I'm saying is he was the health minister before, wasn't he? So same people.
Yeah. And we had Brax and Brumby. I think not in that, was it Brax Brumby or Brumby Brax? Anyway, then we had Ted Baillieu very briefly. He was an absolute lame duck. And then his absolute failure as a premier was what allowed Daniel Andrews to win in a fairly convincing election, and he's held power ever since. I want to come back to what I started to say earlier and then checked myself because I was rabbit holing within a rabbit hole. I was talking about the way that my perception of police has changed, and I'm actually concerned about this. Like, I don't like this. But let me give you an example of how much has changed. Number one, when I was younger, I would have happily become a police officer. I respected police. I was one of those super goody two-shoes. Let me give you an anecdote of just how much of a goody two-shoes I was. I had been at a friend's house, and I'd ridden my bike there, and then my mum picked me up. And this is when I was a kid, obviously. My mum picked me up, and the bike didn't fit in the boot. And so I took the car home. Then I went to pick up the bike, and my friend wasn't home. None of their family was home. The house was locked. The bike was there. I knew how to get into the backyard, and my bike was there, but the helmet was inside. And this was not long after the helmet laws came in. And I kid you not, I wheeled that bike all the way home. It was not a walking distance for a kid. It was a bike riding distance for a kid. I pushed that bike all the way home because the rules said I wasn't allowed to ride my bike unless I had a helmet, and I wasn't going to break the rules, right? That was me. I was that guy, okay? And I was that guy well into my teenage years, and even there were certain vestiges of that left even in my early 20s. That was how I grew up. I was an absolute rule obeyer. After I got married, what is it now? Just over 7 years ago, we lived in Dandenong, and we lived in an apartment right in the center of Dandenong, in between the train station on one side and the Centrelink office on the other side. And so there was a lot of foot traffic of the sorts of people who take trains and go to Centrelink offices going past. And there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of assaults, a lot of crime. People having their cars hijacked, like people who work in the office buildings in the center of Dandenong being mobbed, being attacked by groups as they're trying to get to their car, and they would assault them, steal their keys, and steal their car. And I would end up being an eyewitness to a lot of these crimes because I lived on the first floor of an apartment building where I had a good view out onto the street where a lot of this stuff was taking place. And I used to call the cops all the time. And when I say all the time, let me tell you what made us move. I'd been feeling like something was really wrong, and I was really on edge, and I was really nervy a lot of the time, and I was trying to understand why, because that's not me. And then we had another assault. A guy was assaulted with a brick, bashed with a brick, just literally in front of my balcony there, and I was the first person to respond. I heard him screaming out for help, and I ran onto the balcony. I started swearing my head off at the guy. And he immediately took off and headed around the corner. And we had some good neighbors. And so some other people heard all the commotion. They came out, but they kind of responded a moment later. And then I called the cops, and the cops showed up, and I came down out of the building to help the guy. And when the cops pulled up, I was with the guy there, and the cops pulled up, and one of the police officers stepped out, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, hi, Chris." Which is my name. My name's Christopher. So you know me as Topher, but my name's Christopher. And I thought, there is a police officer whose name I don't know, but he knows me by name on site. Not because I'm a career criminal, but because I'm a fucking career witness to crimes that are happening on the street in front of my fucking balcony. So then I went into my phone and I started scrolling through my recent calls to see who I'd called. And I realized that I had called 000 3 times for 3 different crimes since the last time I had called my wife on my phone.
That's insane.
And that is why we moved out of Dandenong, because I realized why my nerves were shot.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
You'd hear a sound outside that just didn't sound 100% normal, and you'd be instantly on edge. I'd get woken up all the time during the night. Anyway, so that was my relationship with the cops, okay? I had a good relationship with police officers. I called them when there was trouble. I depended on them to be the people that you could bring into a situation like that and make the difference and look after people and care for people. And sadly, in the last 18 months, that has radically changed. Now I see police officers, and, we joke about, you see a police officer and you're like, oh no, have I been speeding? Have I been whatever? Like, okay, you joke. Now I'm like, have they seen me? Am I going to get arrested? Am I going to get assaulted? What's going to happen next?
Yeah.
I hear car doors slamming out the front of my house now, and I wonder if I'm about to get a knock on the door and get arrested. Yeah. I've had the police at my front door multiple times now, trying to intimidate me out of continuing my campaign for human rights for Victorians. And this really bothers me because I don't like this. I liked the Victoria where I trusted the police. I liked the Victoria where I felt that they were my friends and I could rely on them and I could approach them in the street and they were going to do the right thing. I don't like where I live now.
I've got a similar experience, to be honest. Like, I've always had a deep respect for armed forces, not quite cops, but my first boyfriend was actually a Marine. And then I've dated quite a few different servicemen over my time. And there's something about it, like I'm being funny, but there's something about a man that puts on a uniform and goes out knowing that he's there to serve and protect. And I don't know, I'm
you like that?
I'm attracted to an alpha male. What can I say?
Yeah.
I like my strong men. And, and I always one of my exes fought in Afghanistan. He was American.
Yeah.
He was a Marine, and he was telling me stories. And for whatever reason, I've never been in the military at all, but I gravitate towards a lot of the way they live their lives. Like, I think the way that they have such a huge respect with the disciplines and things like that, I appreciate that, and how they develop skill sets from, structure and routine and discipline. And so I respect people like that because I think you're an upstanding citizen. You invest in yourself and you take a lot of pride in upskilling yourself and being, this rock of society. So instantly, someone in uniform commands my respect for those reasons alone.
Yep.
And I'm a bit like you. Everyone likes to think I'm this naughty person. I'm actually the biggest straighty 180. Like, I rebel, but as soon as there's I get told off, I'm like, oh, I hate getting in trouble. And as a kid, I had some moments where I did things that should have had me in trouble with cops, but it was always mitigated by a well-meaning adult. And but the other day, I actually told you this. Since what happened to me 8 weeks ago, I've had some pretty egregious and horrendous things as a result happen. And, death threats is something I hope no one experiences. But I think I made the comment before that it wasn't the death threats I found the most alarming. It was the threats of rape and the publication of my personal address. And so I've taken the correct approaches through the law to look after myself. Yeah. And as a result, there's a couple of different options that I'm pursuing, and which is why I'm a little bit iffy with words. So I just don't want to jeopardize those proceedings. But the other day, one of those people breached their IVO, and I was told, I instantly called my lawyer, and she said, "You report this because it's a breach." I called up the police, and knowing everything that I've told you guys tonight, the police laughed at me. They laughed. I told them that I had been given a threat of rape, and it was an incredibly hostile message, and it had come through my website, and they laughed. And they said, "Well, that's what you get for being a scammer online." That's what the Victorian police said to me.
Yeah, and they're playing judge, jury, and executioner.
Yeah, and I was shell-shocked. I was literally like, what? Because they had asked me for the documentation. So they had pulled up something that had been approved by a judge. And then I told them about a breach, and they laughed. Yeah. And I ended up hanging up the phone, and I was so taken aback because I thought to myself, that's your job, to protect me. And instead you victim shamed me. Yeah. And this guy, sorry, I'll just call him what he was. He was just a total dick. And that's my first taste of the cops being shit. I was like, huh?
And then you get them on the other side saying, "Oh, but we're just following our orders. We're just doing our job." Well, they didn't do their job for you.
No, and not only did they not do their job, they were cruel. Do you know what I mean? So I just was like, and I've never experienced that before. And, I've got friends who are cops, and I've got, people who are, active servicemen and women, and they've got nothing but my respect. And then I see those videos, and then I see, I hear other people's experiences. And, a friend of mine is a active police officer, and he was very defensive and very angry at me for having this approach. And I said to him, like, I love you and you're my mate, but what I'm seeing is the opposite to what you're saying. I think you're great, but the evidence now is overwhelmingly in the opposite. And that's what I was saying at the beginning of this discussion. I'm now having this moment of going, are the cops crap? Because all the evidence is pointing to that. And it's a shift. Wait, I don't want to be like this, but that's where I'm at.
And this is going to take decades, if not generations, to recover. The lasting effect of these couple of years, these 2 years or year and a half now, and counting. I look at my mum's mum, my grandmother, and her husband, my grandfather. The effect of the Great Depression stayed with them for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
Now, they were children of the Great Depression. They weren't adults in the Great Depression, but they were children of the Great Depression. And the effect of that stayed with them all the way through their lives and affected how they lived. They lived on 3 acres. They grew most of their own food. They had chickens. When the sheets wore out, they cut them down the middle, flipped the 2 halves over and re-sewed them so that you were sleeping on the nice bits again. And that was the legacy of them having grown up and them having experienced the Great Depression. And I'm concerned that we're looking at a situation now where the effect of this last year and a half is going to damage the relationship between the police and the public of Victoria for a very, very long time. And it's going to be a very, very difficult and complicated thing to repair. We were talking about the thin edge of the wedge earlier and this whole slippery slope thing. And I think the best example that I can give of that for people that might be skeptical of this issue of the slippery slope, we just had anti-terror police and an anti-terror hard armored vehicle rolled out in public against Victorians who were simply protesting, unarmed Victorians who were simply protesting. These are issues that go back decades. This comes out of the legislation that was passed after 9/11 in 2001. 20-year-old legislation that then led ultimately to this militarizing of the police force. And now we're seeing that being used against Victorian people. We don't have to go back a year and a half. We've got to go back 30 or 40 years and undo, maybe more, and undo an enormous amount of damage that's been done over that time, and culturally as well within the police force, just to restore this trust. However, I don't want to finish on a negative. So one of the silver linings that I'm seeing out of all of this is I am meeting and I am finding a lot of incredible people, and we're finding each other through all of this, which I think is just one of the really encouraging things. I met you obviously before you went through hell, but through all of this, I've met so many other people through all of this that will continue to be friends of mine long after this is done and dusted, through the rest of life. And I feel like people are becoming more active, more aware of their community, more focused on building their community, more focused on their families. You live outside of Melbourne and for your own reasons aren't necessarily getting out and about a whole lot. But are you seeing that silver lining as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there has been a massive shift in my friend group, and I've certainly lost friends, not so much just from what happened, but just from having my stance. And, as I said in the beginning, there's a lot of people who look at life from a very different lens to me. So I can appreciate and meet them with compassion and understand that, they are genuinely terrified of COVID and all that sort of stuff. And I can appreciate that. However, I am, and that's the beautiful thing of social media, for all of its shortcomings, there's a lot of things that come from social media that are incredible. And on my Instagram, I've connected with people across the world. I've got a new best friend in Ireland. Then I'm like, and as the traveler I am, I'm like, I have got accommodation lined up across the globe.
All over the world.
If anything's good come out of COVID, it's this. But like we've both of us have chatted to some new friends in America and things like that. So if anything, there's a lot of positives to this, and there's a lot of conversations that we probably never would have had prior to COVID. And I appreciate that we're not there yet. We're not out of this. It could get a little bit worse before it gets better. But, ultimately, if you can find those little moments, those little silver linings, those little positives, it can start to sort of shift your perspective of where we're at. And that's what I always do every day. And one of the best things I did was turn off comments and DMs from people who aren't followers of mine. Because what it means is that when I do go onto social media, potentially it could create an echo chamber, but I can always seek information. What it means is it's a safe space, and I'm connecting with people and having meaningful conversations. I'm learning new things, and I'm actively engaged in a positive way. Whereas prior to that, there was a lot of hostility, there was a lot of noise, and people trying to coerce you through by bullying you. And that's not productive. No one has ever changed their mind from being humiliated and abused
Or being
online.
bullied. Yeah.
But
I take a slightly different approach. I'm quite happy for people to threaten or do whatever with me. I'm ex-military. I'm 6 feet tall. I'm male. Come at me, right? Come at me. I'm good. I'm fine. Yeah, I'm a lot fatter than I was, but that means that once I've got you on the ground and I've got my knee on your throat, you're going to know about it, right? So now
no
that
one's
doesn't
taking me on yet. I'm ready. Let's do this.
That doesn't apply to everybody, obviously, but that's sort of been my approach. I don't. I ban trolls more than I used to. I've blocked a few people from this chat as we've gone along. And by the way, Marcus is with me again tonight. He's been doing great work on some of the spam that comes through and that sort of stuff. So thank you, Marcus. But yeah, we all have to kind of deal with it and cope with it in our own way. But along with all the haters and the trolls and all the nonsense that I get, I have made some really genuine friends through all of this. And it's just been really wonderful. And so, not just new friends, but I've discovered a new side to some of the people that I already knew. And my friendship and my relationship with them has been deepened as a result of all of what's happened. And once all this is done and dusted, I'm going to carry that with me for the rest of my life. And that, for me, I think is going to be, some people talk about the friends I made in high school or the friends I made in uni or whatever. And, we have those friends for the rest of my life. Well, I didn't really get that. But the friends that I've made through fighting a tyrannical government in Victoria, those I think are the friends that I'm actually going to be carrying with me through for the rest of my life. And if there was a silver lining, that would have to be it.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. And the other thing is too, like to be a little bit more deeper, it's not just the collective conscious shift external, it's what's happening internally to each of us as well. Like, I do honestly believe this is a bit of a call for us to sort of step into a greater sense of purpose and power. None of us expected to be in this position and have this happen in our lifetimes, but you can be a victim of it, or you can be someone that uses this challenge to grow. And that's certainly something I've done. Like, for all intents and purposes, I'm a photographer, but the skill set I've amassed the last 18 months has been way more than I would have thought. And that's what I'm noticing as well. And not that I'm not grateful what happened to me happened, but what I do see is it has been a positive because I've let it be a positive. So, it's allowed me to step into my power and feel much more courageous, I guess you could say. It was a weird liberation. And so they're the positives of taking from this. I feel like I'm being fortified and sharpening my toolkit and feeling a lot better. It has also made my dogs incredibly, incredibly clingy.
Your fur babies. Yeah. Look, it is an interesting thing. And we obviously talked a lot during that time in between when a current affair kind of came for you before you sort of figured out what you wanted to do. You could have been forgiven for curling up in a ball and trying to keep a low profile and never sticking your neck out in public again. Like, I don't judge anyone that takes that particular path, but I think it's encouraging, it's inspiring, it's fantastic. And I think by default, we all need to be of this mindset. If the mob come for me, I will get back on my feet. Yes, you might need some time to heal. You might need to lay low for a period of time. Okay, that's fine. But ultimately, you need to get back on your feet. You need to get back out there, empowered by the fact that they came for you. Winston Churchill had a fantastic quote. So Winston Churchill, before he was Prime Minister of England during the Second World War, he was actually a journalist, and he covered a series of wars that occurred in Africa, the Boer War, and a few other disturbances that happened after that, and then the First World War, and then ultimately became Prime Minister in the Second World War. That's what we remember him for. But he saw frontline action, not as a combatant, but as a journalist before that. And he has a wonderful quote that says, "There is nothing quite so exhilarating as to be shot at without result."
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And you've been shot at now. Now, the funny thing, when you get shot at with words instead of bullets, you are the one who decides whether or not you got hit.
Yeah.
When you get shot at with real bullets, physics decides whether you got hit, right?
Yeah.
But when you get shot at with words, it's actually up to you. You decide whether you got hit or not.
Yeah.
And they wounded you. And then you went, you know what? This is not a fatal wound, and I can get back up. And here you are. And I think it's fantastic. And I want to thank you, honestly, not encourage you. That's patronizing. I want to thank you for the example that you're setting, and for what you've done.
that was my biggest thing, collective, like when I was sitting there and taking stock of things, for the most part, and I think there's a lot of people who were more so worried about my personal well-being that they were saying, step back, you're done with this. You did your best. You spoke up for small business. Like, you've played your part. And I appreciate that. And I could have done that, and I would have respected anyone who chose to do that. But what I realized was that I was being made an example of, so that anyone who came after me would have that I was the warning shot.
Yeah.
And I refuse to be that warning shot. I refuse to let anyone dictate how my life unfolds. And, these people tried to be the full stop on my story, and I just made it a comma.
Yeah.
And so, and that's where I'm at. So, and now actively, the best thing about them doing what they did, and I feel like this is a bad analogy, but they threw every weapon they had at me, because they were like, let's take her down. She got too big because of her views. We need to throw with a kitchen sink at her, and then she'll be done. Yeah. But I resisted. Now you've got no weapons. Like, what are you going to say? Oh, you got a failed business? Yeah, we know. You've already said it. You know, so if anything, they've created a monster.
A good monster. I like this monster. Okay. Yeah. We're gonna wind up. We're heading towards the 3-hour mark. I just want to quickly cover a couple of questions that people have asked. Topher, do you think that an event like Tiananmen Square will happen here? Well, obviously, I hope not. No, I don't actually think it'll come to that. I do actually think there are enough police officers wavering now that before we reach the point where live ammunition is going to get used, I do think that our officers do have enough conscience that it'll never actually come to that. And I certainly hope that I don't get proven wrong on that, but only time will tell. People have been asking about Monica and what's happened with Monica. I can confirm that she has been released. I've been chatting with her. It's likely that I'll be doing a slow chat with her maybe on Saturday night or something like that. She's taking a bit of time, obviously, coming out of prison, decompressing. And I look forward to having a slow chat with her when she's ready and when we can sort of make it work with everything else that's going on in life. But yes, I can confirm that she's out of prison. I don't know the details of the bail conditions, what she did or didn't sign, but we'll find that out together. Yes, the protests are going to be ongoing. Today was a very quiet day. We're just going to have to kind of suck it and see what happens. Tomorrow is expected to be much larger because it's a public holiday and because vaccine mandates have come in for teachers, and some other groups are now going to start getting involved. On Saturday, there is the Millions March Against Mandatory Vaccination march happening in the city as well. So I think it's going to be a pretty big weekend. I'm going to get involved to as big a degree as I can as a stay-at-home dad with kids. And unfortunately, my wife doesn't get a public holiday tomorrow because it's just a public holiday in Victoria and she works nationwide. So I'm going to be looking after kids tomorrow, but I'm going to try and get in for some time if I can. But I'm definitely going to head in on Saturday. And yes, police, you heard that right. I'm telling you, I'm going to go and attend a so-called illegal protest because it's not illegal. It is my human right.
Correct.
Get over it.
And I just want to touch on a couple of things in these comments. If I can be the voice of reason, if you allow me to be that, I can see a lot of people talk about things that get a lot of hearsay, like, for example, Monica Schmidt is paid for by the Liberal Party and all that sort of stuff. That rhetoric just discredits everything. So unless you know something to be true, don't say it, don't share it. Today I think I was telling you, Topher, there was a video, a drone shot of Federation Square that was packed out, and everyone's like, look at the protest today. And there was like a media shutdown, and it's like this big conspiracy. It's like, stop. The more you fuel that, means
that wasn't from today.
No, we lose credibility. So ultimately what we want is to be able to self-regulate and not share that stuff, because then when we do share stuff, we're credible. So if I can encourage you guys, don't put that kind of stuff in the comments. Don't put it on your social medias.
There's another video that's been going around showing, thousands upon thousands of people marching. That's from the 21st of August. Okay. It's not from today. It's from one of the biggest protests that we had a month or whatever it is ago. So yes, it's super important. Today, the reality of today is that, to my knowledge, at this point in time, there was no point in time where a large group was able to gather. There were a few small groups that gathered, but by and large, it was scattered. Daniel Andrews brought out this new technique of stopping live streaming, etc., and that has worked. However, people are very adaptable. So tomorrow, we're going to see what the protesters bring in response to that latest tactic from Daniel Andrews. This is a war, not a battle, and it's going to stretch on for weeks, if not months, hopefully not years. But we will win this, but we're not going to win it tomorrow. We're not going to
No.
win it the day after, but we're only going to win it if we keep the pressure on. So that's what this is about. This is about sustaining the pressure so that we can reach the day where we can win tomorrow.
And interestingly, just on that, the media are starting to get outraged at the censorship themselves. Like, obviously they went to the court to talk about the no-fly zone, but also, I can't remember his name, sorry, but a prominent Channel 7 reporter, like lifelong journalist, came out today saying this is an absolute I can't remember his exact words, I'd be paraphrasing, but he basically said that the fact that the press aren't allowed to live stream and live coverage what's happening is a shame on this democracy. So this is the thing. Everyone's starting to jump on at their own point and welcome where they're at. If a Channel 7 journalist, he tweeted it, and it's everywhere at the moment.
Are you talking about Paul Dowsey, the guy with the shaved head?
No, not him.
Not him. Someone else. Okay. Yep.
He's the guy that does the call out for Channel 7's nightly news, not Peter Mitchell, the other guy.
I don't watch it, so I've no idea.
It's a prominent guy, and he basically said the fact that the media is sort of being banned is disgusting and disgraceful. So what you might see, and if we can sort of just hold that line and be a little bit tolerant, is that as Daniel Andrews escalates and pushes this further and further, you are going to start to see people going, now you've gone too far. Now you've gone too far.
Yeah, 100%.
So creating a no-fly zone over the city is probably the worst thing he could have done, because that's just told everyone you're actively censoring us.
And this is why it's so important to be able to come back and fight another day. Don't push things to the point that you suffer huge amounts of collateral damage on one day, because you're not going to win it today. We've got to be able to keep the pressure on. The tempo has increased. We were holding protests twice a month. Now all of a sudden it's every day. That tempo is exhausting. We need people to be able to maintain that tempo and maintain that pressure. And that means minimizing collateral damage. Get in, be a part of it, but be smart about it. Don't cause trouble. Shut down people who are trying to cause trouble, and live to fight another day. And that, I think, is where we're at right now.
And look after yourselves as well. Like poor Rukshan. I don't know how many kilometers he's clocked up, but this is the thing. You got to be able to like recharge, and you can't fight a battle if you're exhausted. So it's like,
that's right.
Today's probably a good thing. Everyone take a day off, just chill, eat some good food, sleep, whatever you need to do. Come back tomorrow. I'm going to hijack this conversation just for one moment, because I know you won't do it. Guys, just so you are aware, people like Topher, people like Rukshan do it for free on their own time. And there are ways you can support them. They're really terrible at self-promoting, so I'm going to do it for them. Topher has a Subscribe Star. So if you guys appreciate his content, you can contribute. You don't have to contribute much. It all adds up. So, whether it's $5 a month, $10 a month. The reason this is important, and I just want to dismantle any claims that this is some kind of like get-rich-quick scheme. It's certainly not. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of time.
I've been doing this for 12 years. Trust me, I ain't rich yet.
No, and the reason it's important, particularly with people like Topher and Rukshan, and Emily from Voice of Victoria, Matt from Discernible. These guys are doing the job our media should be doing. These independent journalists are on the ground. They're speaking to people that matter. They're giving these things a voice. So it's really important to support them. And, everyone has to pay bills. So, and a lot of us feel shame when we kind of ask for support. And particularly when you get nationally shamed for getting support, you can feel really icky about it. Please support them. Please support Topher, set up to his Subscribe Star, support Rukshan, support Emily from Voice of Victoria, support Matt from Discernible. These guys can't do what they do and keep pouring from an empty cup. So that's really important.
All right. Well, look, I appreciate that. I've just put my Subscribe Star link into the comments. You're right. I only started the Subscribe Star, I think, about 6 weeks ago now, because it feels uncomfortable. I've done this for 12 years. I have fundraised for specific projects in the past in order to be able to hit the road and do stuff to do with the Murray-Darling Basin. And I'm very grateful for everyone that supported those and other projects that I've fundraised for, but I've never asked for ongoing support. I literally set that up about 6 weeks ago. Honestly, I actually regret that I didn't do it a long time ago, not because I'm rolling in the money. You can go there and see what I'm making. But because if I had actually been humble enough to swallow my pride and say, hey, I do actually need help, I would have a much bigger platform now, and I'd be able to make a much bigger difference now than what I can make. Yeah. And so that lesson has been a hard one for me to kind of go, you know what, it was actually my pride that got in the way. And if I'd started 10 years ago, if I'd swallowed my pride and actually done this, then I would be able to make a bigger difference now when it really, really, really matters. So anyway, enough on that. Look, I appreciate Carly. You're right. I'm not comfortable with it, and I don't do enough of it. I should do a lot more. So I do appreciate that. If you need a photographer, I'm not bullshitting. Carly gave us the best family photos we've ever had. No bullshit. And she's absolutely worth more than she charges. So if you don't know how to contact Carly, she's at Carl's J Soda on Instagram is probably the best way. Would that be the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm not a Facebooker. I prefer Instagram, and I usually share pretty photos and dogs, and then put a bit of political commentary in there as well. And every couple of days, I do Instagram lives where Topher and I do one once a week, and we just sort of go over stuff and answer questions, because, as I said, I don't want people to keep putting out things that are hyperbolic and not really helping and discrediting what we're trying to do. So if you guys are ever up for another chat, that's where I'm at. But IG's my platform. Facebook's not my thing.
If you don't have Instagram, you want to get in touch with Carly, send a message to my page. I'll connect you. I cannot recommend Carly highly enough. You are set up at home to be able to do product photography and stuff even during lockdowns. And then obviously outside of lockdowns, real estate photography, family photos, which is what we used Carly for. Absolutely brilliant and well and truly worth the money. You need to charge more. Not me, obviously, but charge everybody else more. Okay.
I will. It's interesting because it's funny. The reason I started speaking up, and it's interesting that it's all come to a head the way it did. But the other reason I started speaking up is I just wanted to work. I don't want charity. The wonderful thing is because I'm good at what I do, I can earn a good income, but I literally are not allowed to work. So
that's right. It's crazy.
That's what started this whole thing. So I don't need a subscribe star. Just hire me as a photographer and I'll be happy.
Excellent. Well, tell you what, jump on my subscribe star, hire Carly as a photographer, and then we can all win. And you'll have some fantastic photographs thrown into the bargain as well. Look, everyone, thank you so much. These are a wonderful de-stressor for me. And I know that you guys enjoy them. You've stuck around all the way to the end. But this is so good for my headspace. Carly, I really appreciate you being my guest tonight. I do enjoy our weekly chats on Instagram. I've thoroughly enjoyed tonight, and thank you very, very much. For those watching, you can look forward to hopefully a slow chat with Monica Schmidt sometime in the next couple of days, all going well. Obviously, I'm not going to put any pressure on because she's dealing with a lot of crap right now. So when she's ready, we will do that. And then moving forward, I am looking forward to having my slow chat with Dr. Paul Monk, who was originally going to be tonight, but for personal reasons, he had to pull out. Hopefully all is well next week and we can have our chat then. He is the former Australian government senior intelligence analyst on China. He was the guy working inside ASIO, looking at all of the intelligence from China, and has gone on to do some really high-level consulting and intelligence type work for the government as well. So he'll be talking to us about China, about submarines, and about a bunch of other stuff as well. So that's what I've got coming up in coming weeks. And then, of course, I will be attending protests as and when I can, childminding duties allowing, and I'll be live streaming, assuming that the government hasn't shut down the grid for some strange reason. So that is what we... Yep.
I was going to say, I'm potentially going to work as media tomorrow, so I am going to be potentially capturing some impressive photography.
Well, I do hope so. I do hope so, and we will look forward to seeing the fruits of your labours in due course. All the best. Let's call it a night. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.